Out of the gates, ready to go. Friday edition of OutKick 360 is here. Live from 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. The crew is all here. Brent Hubbs of Volquest.com will be with us in the final hour of today's show. We'll discuss the reported capacity in Neeland Stadium, Tennessee headlines, SEC discussion, and Arch Manning going to UT. But Texas. We'll discuss all of that with Brent coming up in hour number 3. Bobby Carpenter in about an hour and 15 minutes from now, and a lot to discuss in hour number 1 with the NBA draft, Alvin Kamara, and much more. Gentlemen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I must admit, I watched way more of the NBA draft than I expected last night.
I was determined to get to the Knicks pick at 11. I did not make it. I was disgusted by the whole experience. You can't figure out what the hell's going on with any trade that comes around, which didn't really start until after the Knicks. But I was disgusted by the telecasts, and I'll say it, and I've got no meaning about it. I would have loved to have seen Rachel Nichols. I would have loved to have seen any number of women or women of color on the telecast. That's not my beef. But Malika Andrews came across to me like a college kid doing it. She said, "This is what it's all about." Every time she saw a player hug his mother, and it's not her decision, it's a production decision, but they were replaying hugs like it was highlights. Let's look at this again. And it's a player hugging his mother. I didn't need to see it the first time, but seeing it a second time replayed like it was something to behold in there, as if there's some technique to the hug, or it was a super emotional moment. I can't stand the mother-parent storyline anyway. I understand I'm an extremist on that. But if you're going to play for me all night, 60 parent hugs with sons, I'm sick of it. I understand each of these guys have parents and they've made it through the thing, but it's way more than I could bear. I was tired.
It's the second most popular and really the only two drafts really
because
that we care
NHL
about.
and NBA and MLB go to a minor league.
But the differences in anticipation, broadcast style, and it's on the same network.
It used to be great.
It is vastly different compared to how they go about the NFL draft. And that's what surprises me is the production elements that work so well for the NFL draft. And it's ESPN that's handling this, and it's treated. I mean, the pick isn't even really the storyline in a weird way. Like, as soon as the pick is made, they are off to the next team and discussing who Jay Billis and anyone on the set believes is going to, Kendrick Perkins believes is going to be the next pick, when you've got Woj already tweeting out who the pick's going to be, and you know that these guys are wrong when they talk about it on the set. The whole setup is bizarre. They don't play the hits that work so well with the NFL draft, almost on purpose, trying purposefully not to be the NFL, when it just makes them look more staged. If that, like, the whole broadcast seems very staged to me, even from Adam Silver and the goofy hug that he gives, and the way they cover these guys as they take the stage and they don't even talk to them until, maybe 30 minutes later. It's all very strange.
So the Frenchman the Knicks drafted, I immediately went and read excellent capsules at ESPN.com about. I don't know how long it takes for me to learn that he's never going to play at Madison Square Garden except as a guest. And then I go to, this is 2-3 hours later when I'm going to bed, and I find ESPN's draft grade thing that, by the way, is for insiders only. I'm an insider. I read it. It makes the three-way trade that the Knicks are involved in. And in the early stages, what the Knicks are getting back in this trade, it says TBD.
Chad, what's...
Can you imagine that in the NFL?
You know it's bad, and I want to get to this trade stuff. It's bad when Scott Van Pelt is on after the draft, and he has better coverage of the draft than the actual draft broadcast. With his interviews and his takes from what happened literally an hour and a half ago. Like, it's so much better as a recap than it is a live broadcast. And part of the element that's missing, Paul, and you're dead on, and it's every year, we can play this on a loop next year, is their coverage of what's going on with these trades. Because the way the NBA sets this up, it has to be approved by the league office with the trades, and those aren't finalized for a certain period of time.
A ridiculous period.
And then, like, you hear monetary considerations, like, that's not a part. And I'm comparing to the NFL because, again, that's the draft we watch.
And the NFL's too slow with it.
Yeah, but you at least know the trade's happening, and then the team selecting the player makes the selection. It's not the team that just traded the pick making the selection, handing out a ball cap, and then on the ticker, it doesn't say the
wrong team.
You know, if the Broncos trade with the Seahawks for a draft pick, it's going to say that Denver selected that player, not the New York Knicks when they trade with the Pistons, for instance. Like, the whole thing is backwards, starting with the broadcast decisions. And then, Chad, the element of surprise this year was different than in years past at the top of the draft. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of intrigue with it that hooks you.
You guys forced me to break out my notepad here of all the problems I had with the broadcast as you were talking about it. Oh, where to begin? So I'm watching last night, at least the first part of it, with some family here in town at dinner. And one of my uncles, Chris, is there watching with me. He's a huge Atlanta Braves from Atlanta, huge Atlanta sports fan, big-time sports guy. And he turns to me at one point and says, why doesn't NBA treat this anywhere close to the way, or why doesn't ESPN treat the NBA draft anywhere close to the level they treat the NFL draft? Much like you were talking about. They really need to NFL draft this thing up a little bit, which I agreed with. And look, I know that it's the 50th anniversary of Title IX, and they were paying homage to that with Malika Andrews. Paul, you hit on it. Sage Steele would have been terrific in that role. That is a woman of color that could have done it. There are any number of people that would have done a much better job than Malika Andrews. I don't think Malika Andrews is terrible.
She was terrible last night.
She's 27 years old. She missed some important and very key, obvious things that if you are a storyteller or someone that's paid to communicate over a microphone or on air, you should know. I'll give you one example. When Marjon Beauchamp was drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks, they go immediately to this graphic about all the places he went to in high school. Played at like 6 or 7 high schools. And she says that we got to get to this story. This story is amazing for Marjon Beauchamp. These are all the places he's played in high school. And then that's really it. I don't know why he played at these places. I don't know if he's just a malcontent kid. Turns out I go read stories. He was just looking for better competition, is why he moved around to 4 area Seattle high schools and then went to Glendale, Arizona at one point and played. Did not give us that bit of info as the kid was crying when he was drafted. Look, there were just so many little things that add up to big things. The one good part of this draft, I think 2 of them actually. Jay Billis is Jay Billis.
He's solid.
Who's good. He played his role perfectly, had good analysis of every player, especially the college players. And now I'm blanking on the guy's name, but the NBA front office insider that was there. Maybe Sharp is his last name. He just signed a multi-year deal with ESPN. I thought he was good. The guy next to Woj throughout the broadcast.
Bobby Sharp.
Bobby Sharp, thank you, was good as well. Kendrick Perkins, they are trying their hardest to make him Charles Barkley. He's not Charles Barkley. I don't know what he is as a broadcaster. I know what he was as a player. He is not good. I heard him coughing half the night on mic where they wouldn't mute him when it went to someone else.
Well, that's not his fault.
No, that's right. That's production's fault. But it's an ESPN problem because I think it's pretty clear ESPN wants him to be their Charles Barkley because he's the outspoken one. He's got the Southern drawl. He talks slower. He is ESPN Barkley, and he's not nearly as good and not nearly as accomplished as Charles Barkley as a player coming into this spot. And I thought it was just off when it went from Malika Andrews to Kendrick Perkins to Jay Billis. That dynamic was really off.
Explain this to me. How is anybody served by this? The Knicks at 11, and obviously every year at the draft, I'm trying to get back into the Knicks, right? Every NBA entry point, I'm trying to find a way to get back into the Knicks. So I'm waiting for the Knicks at 11. They draft Ousmane Dieng, or Dieng, who's a Frenchman who played for the New Zealand Breakers.
A treasure hunter with Brad Pitt.
Yes. Okay. It is still listed in the draft results at ESPN.com that they drafted Ousmane Dieng at 11. There's a Knicks symbol next to his name. He's on the Thunder.
I know. And
how does this help anyone? This is a resource device. If I'm going to find out who's on my team, this is inaccurate.
It
makes no sense. If it takes 3 hours, it takes 3 hours. But now he's on the Thunder, and this says he's on the Knicks.
But the NBA, I guess, has to make it official. That's what's so bizarre with it is their timeline of how they approve these trades through the league office. Here's the big issue.
If I want, though, to go buy the jersey of the new Knick, there is no new Knick. They came out of last night with no one.
They traded a ton. Yeah. The only analysis you were getting on the Knicks last night on their picks was through Stephen A. Smith and how they traded away
who pledged
everything.
He pledged this before he was not going to the Garden again, and now he pledged last night he's not going to the Garden again. Stop pledging dumb stuff. You're going to the Garden again.
Well, you're going to the Garden when your employer tells you to go. If you have a broadcast there at any point, too.
So here's the main disconnect with the NBA draft itself, like the broadcast and why it really, in the grand scheme of things, it's closer to the NHL and Major League Baseball than it is the NFL. They got to the 15th pick, and to preview the 15th selection in the 2022 NBA draft, they prefaced it by saying, before you think that it's all about the lottery and all of the top stars are gone, here are the current superstars in the NBA that were drafted 15th or later. Like, they had to qualify that selection at number 15 to tell you why to stick with the remainder of the first round. In the grand scheme of things, they're setting it up to tell you the vast majority of what's about to happen an hour after the draft starts. You're probably not going to see these dudes.
And it was Mark Williams of Duke who played in the Final Four.
But you get my overall point here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, we're analyzing the 74th pick in the NFL draft like it's number 3 overall in some cases.
It's actually funny, though, Hut, because the next 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 guys there actually came out of Division I college basketball, which is rare before you got to a G League Ignite guy
but they
who
have
we
to,
don't know about.
Like, there is just not the same parallels with how we expect these first-round picks to really end up on rosters and the impact they're going to make. So it's not that it's closer to in Major League Baseball and NHL in this regard. You're not really expecting these guys to contribute next year.
No.
And when I say next year, in 4 months, like they're telling you these guys are not going to be a factor for a little while.
Well,
and you're more likely to see them in the D League.
The draft and the TV show suck, but the draft is not what it was because of 1 year in college, because Europe and international have become so big, and because the G League is now a factor. So there are plenty of these guys that...
G League, thank you. I said D League.
Yeah, well, same difference.
Gatorade
Plenty
League.
of these guys that we don't know or care about or have any investment in. Even the very best of the NCAA guys we've seen for a year, as opposed to, back in the day when Patrick Ewing was the number 1 pick.
Right.
When Hakeem Olajuwon was in the draft. We had a massive investment, not just in those guys, but the team that was getting them was transformed. The team that's getting Banchero, is getting better, but they're not going from terrible to fantastic with 1 pick. When the Knicks got Patrick Ewing, that was changing the fabric of their franchise, undoubtedly. That doesn't exist anymore.
Well, and also you mentioned the one and done element of it, and now you've got this NBA G League Ignite program that is playing an exhibition schedule against G League opponents affiliated with the NBA.
You would think that'd be on TV more.
This is
drawing some eyeballs, considering the talent in it.
I mean, it's a developmental school. These guys are going and playing instead of going in college. They're getting paid money to go to Walnut Creek, California, and train for next year's draft.
I know, but if 4 of those guys are getting drafted last night.
But one of them's in the first round, right? They made a big deal. It's a great night for the G League Ignite, and I'm thinking, two of the guys
Marjon
are way
Beauchamp.
lower than people think they would have gone had they gone to college.
To the Bucks,
and
24.
played a year in college had they done that. And Beauchamp's the guy I'm talking about that played from
Bucks.
Yakima Valley. But here's the Scottie Pippen Jr., undrafted. Isaiah Brockington, great player at Iowa State, undrafted. Johnny Juzang, one of the heroes of UCLA's run, undrafted. Kofi Coburn, undrafted from Illinois. These college stars that are there multiple years going undrafted. And I look at a guy like Scottie Pippen Jr., didn't get drafted. I look at a guy like Kennedy Chandler from Tennessee, staying in the state that we're in right now. Both of those guys
After a trade.
make triple. They make triple in NIL if they stay at their school.
How long did it take us
think
to
about that
learn
for a second,
Kennedy
though.
Chandler's destination? We should have put a clock on
Too
that.
long.
Hours?
Yeah, Spurs. It was Spurs to Grizzlies was the transition. Spurs pick Grizzlies player for Kennedy Chandler. But, I mean, we said this when Scottie Pippen Jr. made his decision. You know that Vanderbilt could have put a package together in NIL to get him back for another year. That would have made way more sense than trying to play in the G League for a year, and you would have made more money. Same goes for Chandler at Tennessee. I see some of this, guys, and I hope, honestly, my hope from this is you see stories like that, and it compels guys to stay in college a little while
They
longer.
should totally
Keep in
set
mind,
it up.
though,
You could go back.
Keep in mind,
if
though,
you don't get drafted.
Brandon Wright, I asked him the last time he was in with us what the monetary value of the G League is to a player that's trying to decide whether or not to go and be on that team versus play in college. And he said you would need to entice a player nowadays for $1.5 million to $2 million in NIL. So it's doable, especially at the major power program
For some of those guys you listed.
and especially if you're transferring, like
Pippen.
Yeah, Scottie Pippen Jr. is not going to make $2 million in NIL at Vanderbilt, but if he's on the open transfer portal and he decides to land at the highest bidder, that's basically what he's doing now. He's playing for the LA Lakers in a two-way contract. There are ways to go about it, but I don't know if it's every player that has to make that decision based on just the monetary impact of why you go and you're willing to be a second-round pick as opposed to just staying in college for the extra year and potentially waiting 12 months and going into the draft as a first-round pick where you get some guaranteed salary.
What's the danger for the NBA if these guys don't get drafted? The guys that you just listed, Chad, are going to be competing for a 12th man-ish role at best, right? So what's the danger for the NBA to say, if you don't get drafted, you can go back? I think that's a rule that on its face makes a lot of
Well,
sense.
college has to allow it.
Yeah, well, and you can do that if you don't sign with an agent. That's the issue. They all want to sign with an agent, get paid
I
to go
think
work
even
out.
if you sign with an agent,
I
you should be
agree.
allowed
I
to
think
go
if
back.
maybe there's a payback program or you put it on layaway. I don't know how that would work,
Yeah,
but either
put it
way,
in escrow.
yeah. But it's there's a way to do that. Now, the average salary in G League is $125,000 a year.
A nice livable wage.
The biggest salary
But you're not
last
hitting
year
the money.
was Sharif Cooper, who made $462,000
A
a year.
very livable wage.
I don't think I'm crazy to say that Kennedy Chandler could have made $1 million in NIL to come back to Tennessee.
Certainly could have
On a
made
possible-
$425.
on a possible, Elite Eight, Final Four caliber team that right now is going to get some picks to win the SEC. That could have been an SEC favorite or close to it with him. And we mentioned Scottie Pippen. Even if not at Vanderbilt, if Scottie Pippen Jr. decides to transfer to North Carolina, I'm just throwing a school
Or
out,
Arizona.
or Gonzaga. I mean, there are plenty of places where he's going to make that or more. And
Get spotlight.
this kind of goes back to our discussion, Paul, about, games matter to you. Like missing games at quarterback should matter to NFL players. And it shouldn't just be about the money. Let's say the money's even if it's $450,000 in NIL to come back.
You're playing.
You are playing in high-profile games in front of a lot of people.
As opposed
Is
to
there
sitting.
no value to that? It's not even sitting. It's playing in front of empty arenas in the G League, not on television. I mean, there is value to me
To being seen.
playing on ESPN on a Saturday night against the Kentucky Wildcats at Rupp Arena. That's awesome. Isn't that why you get into sports in the beginning when you watch it as a kid? Is that maybe one day you're playing in those
also,
games?
doesn't it raise
I don't
your
think you're
stock in a
doing it-
year?
I don't think you're getting into basketball to play for the G League Ignite program. in Walnut Creek, California.
Do you think it raises your stock in a year, or do you think, oh, there's a whole new pool in a year and it pushes me down?
Here's the deal. I don't think Kennedy Chandler's stock is going to raise that much. He needs to be a better free throw shooter. You can get better at that in a year. He got hot from 3 in the end of the year. I'd like to see more consistency throughout a season with him. He's not going to grow. He's going to be too small for most people throughout. So
and another draft class pushes him down because there's going to be another dozen of those guys.
The risk is injury. You have some really bad injury and you go undrafted the next year instead of second round.
Does the NBA Hutton know there's a problem here? Are they blind to it? Because it feels like they're blind to it.
I don't know that they care.
I think they see they have this. I've long said I would love for an NBA franchise to be in Nashville because they have the superstar quality
passing through.
But that's the crown jewel of the league, though, is every team has the superstar player that is able to sustain whatever market they're in.
But don't you look at the NBA and say they've created a year-round calendar for themselves, and here's something that used to be a big event for us, and we've turned it into crap, and everybody's spending today, if they're listening, complaining about it.
I think
but they're not complaining about it. That's the thing. They have these media guys who just regurgitate this line. Jay Billis, right after the first pick was made, said, you know what, everyone watching, we really have 3 number 1 overall picks tonight. It's really 3. No, Jay, it's 1. It's 1 because none of the 3 stood out enough to be the number 1 overall pick this year. 75% of America can't tell you who the number 1 pick was last year.
I can't.
So, Cade Cunningham. But that's the point, is the intrigue of the here and now with the young crop doesn't pay off for the league until 3-4 years down the road. And by that time,
doesn't matter.
They're getting a max contract where they are, or they're opting out and demanding some contract and trade agreement where they're shipped out and they're headed to another team. Like there's such a churn with these guys in the league now. I don't think they view this whole draft process as a problem as much as it is because they have everyone preaching their message, which is, man, these guys are just elite talents who are they're in it. They've just set themselves up for life. And really, they're not really a storyline now until 2 or 3 years down the road at best.
That's
right?
the thing, and those are the 3 years that they used to be in college and get to NBA caliber.
I'll go back to the perfect scenario for both leagues, honestly. I think from a risk assessment standpoint for NBA teams drafting guys and for players when they're young, go to the college baseball model, either straight out of high school or 3 years minimum. If you go to college, you're playing for 3 years. 3 years out of college, you can enter the draft. If you get drafted out of high school and you're good enough to go, like every other American at 18 years old, go and work and go to the draft like Kobe Bryant did, like LeBron James did. Let those top 10 to 12 guys, realistically, they'll probably get drafted in the first 2 rounds. Others won't, will go on. But that's life. Like I'm not one to sit there and say we have to hold the hand of 18-year-old basketball phenoms and make sure they make the right decision. That's on them. If they enter the draft and they think they're a first-round pick and they go undrafted, that is on them.
And they end up in the G League or in Europe?
I honestly think, again, going back to what you said before, find a way for them to go to college if they go undrafted. Then enter the college system for 3 years. Give a chance for – it's like in baseball, you don't really even have to declare. You get drafted. They talk about draftability, signability in baseball, right?
Right.
If I'm a high school shortstop, I might get drafted in the 14th round by the Minnesota Twins.
They just know.
I may have a scholarship to go to Ole Miss, and I decide between the two at that point.
And it's another reason NFL is king, because you just need the physical development, so the 3 years are mandatory, and they step in a pile of lucky doo-doo.
I think that scenario is best for both leagues, college basketball and the NBA.
Yeah, I agree.
You got guys way more ready-made with a bigger body of work to choose from, and if you want to go the high school route, you could base your whole team around the philosophy of we're going to get 18-year-olds, 5-star players that we believe are going to come in and develop them and have a team full of guys that get the clock started quicker on their career. And that's fine, too. It's pick whatever route you want to go for a team.
Coming up, Alvin Kamara is facing an NFL suspension. We'll discuss that, plus first-year NFL coaches tied into my opinion on Mike McDaniel. who I described in a column today as he just doesn't care about the outside noise that expect him to fail right out of the gate as a first-time head coach. We'll compare him to the others in the league and take a look at his situation in Miami and the quarterback he's working with. All of that and more straight ahead on OutKick 360. Glad you're with us on this Friday edition from Music City. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. Alvin Kamara faces NFL suspension. That's the now storyline on this Friday as we await what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson. And, Paul, the reports are up to potential 6 games based on what happened this offseason at the Pro Bowl.
I'm not high on the Saints with him. I think a lot of people overrate them. I'm not not Deshaun Watson, I want to say. I'm not Jameis Winston guy at all. I'm not a Dennis Allen guy at all. And I went last night, I was telling you guys, I was trying to place some bets on the NBA draft, during the NBA draft. Nothing available at FanDuel or anywhere. And then I said, well, I just saw the Kamara thing. I'm going to go under the win total for the Saints no matter what. And all of the over-unders team by team weren't available to me either. You could bet like over-under or a parlay of these teams are going to win 10 games or AFC or NFC champions or Super Bowl champions. But the over-unders for team by team were down also, which struck me as weird. I would think that would be up from now till opening day.
Yes.
So maybe that was a glitch or what. I don't know. I'll look for it again over the weekend when I'm in front of the TV at some point. That kills the Saints as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you don't know what you're getting out of Michael Thomas. I know they've added some young talent, but, saw Michael Thomas doing box jumps lately. I think people were impressed. I was unimpressed. He's far removed from his injury stuff. Wasn't a very high box jump, and now Kamara, who's one of the most versatile backs in the league, you take him out of the mix for 6 games, and I don't think they're very dynamic.
So forgive me for always going back to how things were at the time, because I look back at the Deshaun Watson situation last year and compare it to how the NFL is reacting this offseason. But keep in mind this little fact whenever the suspension is handed down. And I do think this matters and deserves some attention. The NFL and police waited until after the Pro Bowl to arrest him at the site, at the venue. They colluded together.
I've forgotten about it.
They colluded to make that happen after the game. And in fact, if they're all about, conduct detrimental to the league and the personal conduct policy and all this, and now they're waiting to see the legal process play out, quote unquote, which they can say all they want. I'm not condoning anything with this, but at the same time, I hate the fact that the league just makes up things as they go here.
First 6.
As teams are getting set for training camp, instead of as teams are preparing to move on from certain players or players who are not available during the bulk of the offseason. That's my biggest issue with it.
Quickly, here their first 6, Chad. Falcons, Bucks, Panthers, Vikings, Seahawks, Bengals. Not bad. Bengals tough, Bucks tough. The rest of them may be handleable.
Well, and it's going to show the value of Sean Payton, this big $20 million guy, supposedly, that everyone in the NFL wants. So I think he's a great coach. We start to see, his value to that Saints team. Here's what I hate about this story, guys, is that Alvin Kamara, one incident, bad incident, no doubt, not condoning it at all. Something should happen to him through the league. But he already has this knowledge or this expectation of 6 games with this. And meanwhile, it's just complete mystery with Deshaun Watson. Now, you talked about making up as you go. I hate that it's just like, okay, it'll
end up being indefinite for him.
Yeah, this guy, hey, I feel like it's going to be 6 games. That's what I'm expecting. And then, who knows with the other one.
And that's this coming from Florio, who says the expectation is up to 6 games. And it'll be appealed, and who knows what it ends up being. But, he was arrested on felony battery charges right after the game. And it was a big headline then. But it also came out that they knew about this prior to the game even kicking off. And
the league did.
The league did, yes.
The league let him play knowing an arrest was pending.
Right.
It's unbelievable. Just unbelievable.
We talked about it at the time.
I know.
And so, he is. He's going into the final year of his deal. It was originally, he just signed an extension after he was going into the final year of his deal. He was banged up last year, and the Saints have been preparing for him to be back. I'm not saying he shouldn't be suspended in some way based on the way the policy reads, guys. But the time to do this, if you're truly going about it like in a timeline that makes sense to me, with Watson and the Browns, no matter if you agree or disagree with what they gave him contractually, this goes for any player, any team. And why I harped on it last year with how they let the Texans just swing out in limbo with all this. Let the teams know and come up with and make up your mind on determination on if you're going to discipline a player before the legal process plays itself out during the bulk of the offseason instead of the 4-week time frame here as teams are getting set after OTAs and minicamps with a 90-man roster and their biggest players are presumed playing whenever 3 weeks ago they were hosting minicamps. I just don't think the process makes sense with how these news leaks are put out there and the suspension happens as guys return to camp and as teams have already had the chance to draft a player that could help supplement the loss of said player or sign a player in his absence.
Well, I agree with you generally, though I don't think this timetable is bad. They knew something was going to come down, and this isn't up against the start of training camp. But it's been bad for a long, long time. You remember Josh Evans all the way back, Titans defensive lineman, rest his soul, had an appeal over a PED suspension, and that they just would not come to a conclusion, This was early 2000s. And, I remember writing, I was way back at the Tennesseans saying, like, you have to tell them at some point so that they can make their plans, set their lineup. This, by comparison, is early. But there is no general timetable as to if your guy does something, when can you expect to know so that you can plan. There just isn't. And in that regard, you're absolutely right. But there should be some kind of standard.
I agree with everything you just said, Paul, except for the fact that literally last year I can point to the NFL and how they handled Deshaun Watson, where we didn't know if the guy was eligible to play or not. Technically he was because he was on a roster.
Yeah.
And
what
the
bailed
Texans
them out
would
is
have
his
known about
contract
this last
offseason. He was going to hold out, so that bailed everybody out.
Point being, the Saints know that there's discipline coming. I would expect the Texans thought the same thing last offseason. And
but the Texans,
never handed down.
Texans, even before that, had Deshaun Watson saying, I'm not playing for you this year, I'm demanding a trade.
But it's tough to go by that standard of, well, it's okay because he didn't want to play there and probably wasn't going to play either way.
They jumped on
They
that.
jumped on it, but you need to get something consistent. And we can debate the merits of what the NFL should do to help a team that employs someone who got themselves in trouble, right? I mean, we could say, well, maybe that's part of the punishment is the uncertainty. You drafted a guy or you brought a guy in, he gets busted, then you're going to have to wait until we're ready.
And you're
going to have to figure it out on your own as to what to do. Again, debatable. But here's what's not debatable. Come up with a standard and execute it with every team. If that's a timeline, if that's whatever, every team needs to have the same ability to know in order to roster build for their team. That's going to be important for everyone. You can't let one drag on while you come up with a clear and quick solution with another team that helps that team find a replacement for that player, do something different in the draft, free agency, whatever, where you're penalizing another team.
Well, you can't, but they can, and they do over and over. And I think what they'd say is every case is different. Every case has its own timetable. This is devil's advocate here. I don't agree with it. That's exactly what they'll say. And, we can't control the clock on what our investigations turn up or the pacing of a felony case. So it just happens as it happens.
Here's what we're learning right now, what the rest of the public is learning. Roger Goodell works for the 32 NFL owners. Sure. Okay? So it's fine if you screw the Houston Texans. Because the other 31 will be like, well, tough break on the Houston Texans. But if enough teams get screwed over by this with timing, then enough of the owners are going to come together and say, we need to come up with some better plans in terms of how we administer punishment in a timely fashion where we're not left in limbo for too long. But it's going to have to take enough teams to have that affect them to do it.
I say this tongue in cheek, but who was the coach of the NFC last year in the Pro Bowl? I know Vrabel coached the AFC.
Would have been the losing team of the NFC Championship game, San Francisco. Shanahan?
Yes, Mike Shanahan.
Kyle Shanahan.
Kyle Shanahan.
Yes. So
Mike would have been really something
Yeah.
coaching that game.
So Dennis Allen knows that discipline's coming. Kyle Shanahan and Goodell admitted at the pre-Super Bowl press conference, the NFL knew about this and allowed him to play in a Pro Bowl. But now I just hate the back and forth with how they make up the rules as they go, because it makes it extremely hard for shows like ours that attempt to be accurate and fair and down the middle on exactly how things are and the process will play out. The honest truth is, Florio and all these guys have no idea if it's going to be based on whether or not the legal system plays out. The legal system wanted to speak with Alvin Kamara, and Roger Goodell admitted they knew it and let him play, and then dealt with it later.
That's the most questionable
Can we
thing out of all
also
of it.
just
It's
talk
so
about the
BS.
the absurdity of taking the risk to play Alvin Kamara in a Pro Bowl? Are we defending the sanctity of the Pro Bowl? Like, why do you not just not?
I know.
What's Alvin Kamara's value to the Pro Bowl? I mean, you know this happened. Okay, you're not playing the Pro Bowl. We'll figure it out. You're about to get arrested. Like, why would you jump through hoops
we're a little thin
or
on the
delay
depth
things
chart at running back
for the Pro Bowl? I get it if he's getting ready for the Super Bowl. And
No,
they
even a
find
Super Bowl would even be even worse.
It'd be worse, but at least I could come back and defend. It's the Super Bowl. We're defending the sanctity of the Super Bowl, and we didn't want to screw up our big day. The NFL's big day is not Pro Bowl Sunday. No one gives a damn. So why protect a guy to play in the Pro Bowl? That is the strangest part of this whole story.
And also,
to me.
Las Vegas police is saying, well, yeah, okay, we're cool. If you want us to wait, we'll arrest them coming off the field instead of going on to it.
I mean, it sounds like they're completely on the take from the NFL, right? Let me
yeah.
call my guy with the LVPD, and I'll make sure they serve that warrant post handshake.
What time would you like us to
at
do
the
it?
Pro Bowl?
Yeah, just tell us what he'll be wearing so that we can recognize it.
So Alvin Kamara faces a suspension. Florio says it could be up to 6 games. No one really knows. Maybe he's right. It'll be appealed no matter what. And we don't know when the timeline is for when this is going to be handed down or if they're going to wait for the legal process to play out. Like, insert player name here, and that's the routine answer for anything we'll discuss on this, because it can change based on the forecast of whatever the league feels like they need to react to at the time.
By the way, while we're talking suspensions, one note on Deshaun Watson, and I was unclear on this. I initially thought it to be the case, then I thought not. Roger Goodell, once he gets the recommendation, not the recommendation, the discipline from Sue Robinson, is it?
Yes.
If it's appealed and it comes to him, he can lower it or raise it. So he basically can do anything he wants. So, I mean, he remains judge and jury. It's just an intermediate step here. So I don't know how much the players gained. We'll find out once we see this happen.
Can you imagine parenting like that, going to your kid and saying, hey, I'm going to give you this punishment, but you can lower it or raise it once I give it to you?
Or I'm going to give it to you, but then your mother can just do whatever she wants. This is just kind of I'm putting it on hold.
From raise to all rise, we discuss Judge and the Yankees next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on. Aaron Judge and the Yankees avoid the arbitration ruling on salary. They've agreed, both sides, to a $19 million salary for 2022. He's still on track to be the free agent after this year. And the fascinating part about just betting on yourself, it's commendable to bet on yourself and win. And even if it backfires on you, you're believing in your ability. But the ability to turn down what he was reportedly offered and then to bounce forward with the season that he's having is remarkable to me.
Probably
crazy money was offered his way, over $250.
Probably fun too to have the arbitration deal
done
after a walk-off. Last
night.
Yeah. Wrapped what would have been a double, but they only need a single into the corner last night to drive in a winning run, where they come back from 6-3 down in a game of three-run home runs against the Astros, who are a pretty good team. It's been twice in the last couple nights that I've given up on the Yankees. I think there's something about watching them in Tampa Bay, watching any game in Tampa Bay, it just makes you want to turn it off.
It's dark and it's like Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah. So even though the
very
Rays,
gray.
even though the Rays are pretty good and those are compelling games,
feels minor league even when it's not.
I turned it off a couple times, but last night they were down 6-3, and I felt like even for the Yankees it was insurmountable, and they get a 3-run jack from a guy who's terrible, Aaron Hicks, and Judge wins it.
They met in the middle on this ball.
He
was offered 17.
17 was the bottom number, 21 was the top number, and they met in the middle. I'm like you. Like, I can't conceive of a situation where he's not re-signed to a big, record-breaking deal after this season. You can punch a few holes in him in that his first season and this season are the only season so far where he's been healthy.
Yeah.
Other than that, though,
and can he get better
he's
than this year?
Everything you want. He's a little older than most of the guys who've gotten their big contracts as compared to Trout and Harper. But just the idea of him playing for somebody else would sicken any Yankee fan, and George Steinbrenner would roll over in his grave. If they go win the World Series like they should this year, to follow that up with him leaving would be, a New York tragedy. I can't imagine they'd let that happen. But there's a small part of me compared to previous Yankee stuff that feels like there's a possibility. That previously, previous guys, I would have said never, never, never.
It doesn't have to be a New York tragedy when he stays in the city and goes to the Mets after this season.
That would be a super tragedy.
Which is a possibility. He is plus
by the way,
100.
if he went to the Mets, he would get back.
Typically, yeah. And they'll be paying him money like they do Bobby Bonilla.
I don't know
for like 30 more years, probably.
Like, if I'm countering re-signing him to a mega contract, I don't know if he can play better based on his availability and how
he is plus 100 to win the AL MVP right now. That's how far away. He's, I think, at 5 or 6 more home runs in second place in baseball at this point. I mean, he is just astronomically better than he's been right now this year. So it's the right time to be playing this well.
I bet
Not
him,
that he's been bad, but he's very good this year.
I bet him to win the home run title, and I look at the payout pretty frequently. So right now, on a $5 bet for him to be the regular season home run leader, I could cash out for $42.52 on what would pay me $90. How long do I sit on that?
I would cash out and bet on someone else below him at high odds right now to win it, and then cash out on that if that guy
I've also got
catches up.
$5 on Giancarlo Stanton, which would pay $145. Right now, I could cash out for $1.52.
Coming up, how long we lasted watching the NBA draft last night. We want to compare notes. We don't know the length of each of our viewing pleasure last night with the association. And there's a player in the NBA that became 2 years younger overnight for NBA teams. Details next. Second hour is here. Bobby Carpenter will join us. We'll talk NFL and college football headlines with the former Buckeye, former first-round pick in the NFL draft for the Cowboys. He'll be with us in about 20 minutes from now. NBA draft was last night. We went through what we thought of the overall broadcast, which is not great. How long did you guys actually stick with it?
I made it so I was somewhere with family, then I went home. First 10 picks I watched pretty much throughout. Went home and probably watched the final 3 picks of the first round, trying to see if Kennedy Chandler was going to go in the first round, and then maybe the first 5 or 6 the second round.
Yeah.
Before completely checking out.
I was in and out, but I was on it a lot through the first 10. But I missed, like, the commissioner announcing picks. I saw a lot of other stuff. I tried to make it to the Knicks at 11. But after that, I was completely out.
I lasted about as long as you did, Paul, on the broadcast itself. I was back and forth early second round as I made it up to I went from downstairs to the upstairs and flipped on the TV and started flipping around. I checked back in and stuck with it for about 3 picks. And prior to, I did see the Knicks make their selection, changed off of it, came back when they were setting up here's why it still matters at pick 15. And then I rolled my eyes at it and turned it off.
But when they went,
it's also weird to flex that halfway through the first round. Like, we all know people pass pick. I mean, yeah, it's still important.
When they went away, when they showed the second replay hug, which was, I think, at number 6, let's see that again. And this is what it's all
slow-mo
about.
This time.
It was slow-mo. I'm not kidding you.
Look at the form. Look at the solid base, squared away, shoulder length apart as they lean in for the hug. This is the type of posture you want to see.
Draft pick son on ESPN. I talked to my remote control. I said ABC. Then I endured Stephen A. for a little while. But they were going immediately to mom or mom and dad on the couch with the player immediately after the pick, which I also found insufferable. Who's the woman that was conducting those interviews? I didn't even know her.
Monica McNutt.
I mean, it was just purposeless. I find most family interviews purposeless, absolutely uninformative. Everybody's got parents. Everybody has big moments in their lives. At big moments in people's lives, I do not, maybe I'm unique in this, I don't wonder, I wonder what their mom and dad are thinking. And so I hated that also. So I found both telecasts insufferable.
I love anything where you just keep talking and it gets into, can you believe that Make-A-Wish kid territory, what you're getting with. I mean, everybody's got parents. I don't care about your parents. All I care about with the parents, Paul, is I like to see the parents. I like to see what the parents that created.
Who bred this person?
Who bred this NBA star? Like, who bred this 6'10", 250-pound man at 18 years old?
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
I do like to see that. Like Chet Holmgren's dad with the ponytail, the guy who they showed who's all the games are on TV now for Gonzaga, but he films every game since he was like 8. So he's in the crowd. You know, they showed him filming on his own private, camcorder every game. I like seeing his, parents walk in, or anyone's parents, to see what the parents look like. But when Monica McNutt, it gets cut off because there's another draft pick from talking to the mom. She's talking to the draft pick at one point, and then, Mom, I know Mom's excited, but we got to get back to the podium. And David said, well, we'll get right back to Mom here in a minute. You could tell it's like, I don't want to be sitting here and bring Mom to the couch for the interview, and then Mom doesn't get to speak. So I got to get, we got to get it back to David Silver for pick number 2 of the NBA draft. But we're going to get back to.
We'll get back to Mom, though.
Paolo Banchero's mom has been waiting patiently, so she's got plenty to say when we come back. But here's the second pick of the NBA draft.
This is the deep dive that we all deserved but didn't get. Jake LaRavia, who ends up being the 19th overall selection by the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies traded up. So I don't know if the websites will actually say he's on the Grizzlies roster right now. But the Grizzlies traded up for him at pick 19 out of Wake Forest. Literally within the last couple of weeks, his draft stock skyrocketed.
My sources say he's on the T-Wolves.
Okay. So he was officially drafted where the Timberwolves were supposed to select at 19, and they probably made the selection, and then he's now a Grizzly. So Google and the media, I put that in quotations, like they were reporting that he was 22 years old. In fact, he's 20. And so the story goes, LaRavia was like, my agent asked me about this. I was born in 2001. We got the birth certificate to prove that I'm 20 and not 22. And if you Google how old he is, he pops up at the time. He popped up as 22 years old. And teams were just going based on that, like height, weight, age, all that, and had no idea that, in fact, he was 20 years old, and that improved his draft stock. That likely made him a first-round pick last night.
They love the older guys in Minnesota.
I like to call this the reverse Rafael Furcal. When he was a Brave who got a contract, and the Braves, I think, at one point tried to get money back because they thought they signed him as like a 14-year-old, and he was really 19. So when they re-signed him, he was like 29, but they thought he was 24. They're like, well, wait a minute, this isn't right, because the birth records from wherever he was from were not accurate on just how old he was. This is the good side of that, where you're actually younger than what people think you are.
Well, he's lucky that they caught it, because where he's drafted versus where he was projected are vastly different areas of the draft. He was projected to go mid to late second round. He could be on the list right now with Scottie Pippen Jr. as an undrafted player. And he ends up being the 19th overall selection, which means he will receive a 4-year contract worth $13 million. Like, that is game-changing compared to where he was projected to go.
So the Grizz loved him.
The Grizz loved him, but, I mean, executives are basing your prospect status off of your age and your development opportunity with them. And 20 is much better to them than 22, especially if you're going to be bouncing around a lot to different developmental leagues, which is where he's likely headed. But still, he gets 4 years, $13 million to do so.
So my first thought,
that's rare to see.
When I hear this story is, what's Wake Forest doing? How do they not have the accurate age of the guy in their media guide when they bring someone in?
But he had to prove he was born on November 3rd, 2001.
It should not get to NBA draft preparation to learn this. You were at an ACC institution.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Forbes, the head coach, and the administration, led by one John Curry at Wake Forest, should be more on the ball.
Oh, well, that's your issue.
If his interview skills are anything like his age skills with people, then that's why we had this mix-up at Wake Forest. They should know how old he is. Unless he just lied to everybody. But why would you lie and say you're older? Unless you're just trying to get into a bar.
It's just a typo that
you're trying to get in the NBA, not a bar, not the campus bar. Come on.
They put he was born in 1999 instead of 2001, I guess. I mean, I don't know why else. I mean, once you type up the bio, it's in there, and if you don't look Google yourself, you don't even catch it, really.
That's an even funnier twist of this, is he's been underage drinking at nightclubs for a year and a half, and he had to keep the lie going.
Yeah,
maybe that's
tell people just to make sure that his ID still held up.
The way he told the story last night to the New York Post was, he's like, his agent called up and was like, "Jake, you're 22. Like, everyone's reporting you're 22 years old." He's like, "No, I'm 20." He's like, "We need to prove this immediately."
Well, that's a good agent.
Here's my license. I'll send you a picture. I'll text you a picture of my license.
Yep. Hit us up on Twitter at OutKick360 is where you can find us. Mentioned this late last week when the news came down. We went through all the cities where the 2026 World Cup will be played and all the host cities. Nashville, of course, not one of them. Kansas City was. The impact long-term for this is interesting to follow, because as a part of this proposal with FIFA, Kansas City and the government there, they are going to put in mass transit from the city to the Arrowhead complex. And given the fact that the Chiefs have a lease that is expiring in 2031, all of these upgrades to the stadium will likely make that a complete non-factor when it comes time to use leverage for either a new build or flex that you're actually going to buy property and use it on your own.
In terms of you got to stay.
Yeah, it's not. It's good. We're going to see the opposite of what happened with, or what is happening with the Browns, for instance, and it's all because Kansas City's awarded the one of the host sites for the World Cup in 2026. I found that very interesting.
The Royals too. How much is that going to cost? Because I saw 51 million. So I saw a different story or a different piece of the story that 51 million in improvements, and I thought that's a pretty minimal investment in the building that would still allow them to leave or go build somewhere else. I didn't see the mass transit thing, and I thought to myself, 51 million isn't a very big investment. They could stay through 2028, 2030 with that money invested in the building and not feel bad about it and depart. I didn't see the mass transit element.
Yeah, they're going
which is great for the Royals also.
Yes, and they have a great complex there.
It is hard to get in, like tailgate time.
But it's also very old. Like a stadium. Consider how little we actually visit these stadiums before they move on to the new ones now. This one's built in '73.
Smallest jumbotrons in the league by far, I think. I mean, it's nothing.
Yeah, it's Buffalo's stadium. I think right around the same era.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the comp to me. Is if you go to a game in Orchard Park and Arrowhead, environments are different. Yeah, it's more of a bowl. Orchard Park, Bills Stadium is less of a bowl there like it is in Arrowhead.
Because it's dug in. Orchard Park is dug in. Kansas City's ground level.
When you walk around the stadiums, though, and I've been in both, it's very similar. I mean, and it's not nice.
Bare bones, yeah.
But you can make it work. Right?
Well, I mean, Kansas City's also, both of those places have two of the best environments you're going to find.
Yes.
Because of the passion
Absolutely.
of the fans.
And the stadium aura, like even
There's
if you
some
tore it
history
down and rebuild it, I don't. The fan base it factors into it, but tearing down Arrowhead with just the atmosphere that it creates, there's just a different vibe there because of the stadium aspect.
And you know how I know those fan bases are truly special? The clamoring for anything new is not coming from those fan bases. Those stadiums still exist today in 2022 because those fans want to go watch their football team.
Yep.
And they like the history of those venues.
You're right.
They're not the ones doing it. Buffalo's going to get a new stadium, but it's because the owner wants a new stadium and wants more money out of a new stadium. And Kansas City, the same way. I respect that with those fan bases. It's also two cities, not to demean the two places, but they're not as into nice things as L.A. when they build their stadium.
Well, Kansas City's different than Buffalo in this respect. They want to host
they want to host events.
And
Buffalo's given up.
They're hosting the NFL draft, for instance, coming up. So
and the World Cup.
And the World Cup. Yeah, exactly. So they're looking to attract more aspects than just 10 home games a year for the Chiefs. They're going about it the non-conventional way because FIFA chose Kansas City, and the city's going to buy in now to those upgrades. And for once, you're not going to have to hear ownership try to flex about needing certain things and certain aspects that other markets provide, or the footprint of the stadium provides to the downtown area with upgrades that you want built in if you're going to continue the lease with the city.
And it's a MLB and MLS story.
Right.
City, as opposed to hockey as your second sport in Buffalo, which isn't the one you'd choose if you were picking.
Well, when you think about events, you mentioned that Kansas City's trying to get events and they're actually landing them. The only thing I can think of Buffalo actually getting outside of their two major pro sports teams, NCAA basketball tournament first and second rounds.
Yeah.
They're in the
regularly.
rotation. They're in the rotation.
Yeah, I feel like every other year you've got games in Buffalo that start the NCAA men's tournament. So that's one. They clearly have a good relationship with the NCAA to bring college basketball, NCAA
It's a well-located arena that has some of those, overpasses where you can go to hotels and bars without being outside.
So it's like Minneapolis in that respect.
A little bit, yeah.
A miniature Minneapolis minus the dome aspect.
What a selling point. You think that's the Chamber of Commerce? That's what they're going to go with now? How would you describe your city? We're not quite like Minneapolis, not nearly as nice.
Some similarities.
But there's some indoor walkways, but no dome. Also, no great stadium downtown. But other than that, also no Major League Baseball team.
But we have
other
wings.
than all those nice things, we are just like Minneapolis.
A lot of wings, and we're very close to Niagara
Weather's
Falls.
very close, very similar. A little bit more wind. The wind's worse here. Other than that, it's all very close.
Did we mention we have Niagara Falls?
Yeah, very close also. That's very, very close.
What do you think their biggest competition is? Like Indy?
For events in Buffalo?
No, for just college basketball games and stuff like that.
Oh, well, Indy's way ahead of them because Indy has they
Well,
play in the
and
football stadium.
Well, yeah, that's right.
So they'll play Final Four and
they have the NCAA right there.
Yeah, their chief competition is Boise. There are places like that. Spokane.
No, but regionally though.
Well,
Dayton.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think
it's not
about
too
games.
far from Cleveland.
Because that's how
really.
they're choosing
Yeah.
Buffalo.
It's not too far from Cleveland, really.
Brooklyn. But they've been playing in Brooklyn at Barclays Center.
But they don't play first and second round. I'm trying to think of consistent first and second round. Pittsburgh is another one that's close by. That gets first and second round games, not regionals, because now all the regionals are going to go. Typically, it's going to be a really nice NBA arena and/or dome stadium. And then you get to the Final Four, and it's always in a football stadium.
So does Indy ever get first and second rounds on years where it doesn't get Final Fours?
I don't recall that other than the bubble.
Because it's such a good arena.
Yeah, Tennessee, remember, lost to Oregon State when we were here having a watch party in Indy at the field house.
When they had everything
in the
on.
bubble.
But the field house is a great venue.
Yeah, it's
That'd
nice.
be a great place to host early round games when they don't have the big deal.
Bobby Carpenter about to join us. We'll discuss Arch Manning committing to Texas. We will dive into Alvin Kamara and the possible suspension for the Saints running back and copywriting the word the. The Bobby Carpenter joins us next on OutKick 360. Coming up, an amazing stat that brings back nostalgia to the late 90s, early 2000s. One of my favorite teams growing up. We'll tie it in with Aaron Judge, the Yankees, and the run that the Yankees are on right now. That's coming up in about 20 minutes. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. So last night we've been recapping a bit of the NBA draft throughout the show today, and a handful of times the commissioner or the vice commissioner, I don't know what he goes by, assistant commissioner, assistant to the assistant commissioner, they would use the word the Ohio State University. And I'm thinking, man, why are they stressing this so much? And I realize people say that, right? But it's because yesterday, Ohio State won the trademark for the word the. And this is something that they've been using since 1986, but it's been a 3-year legal battle that concluded yesterday, where they have officially registered the trademark the after trying to brand this for years. And it's official now. It's the Ohio State University. And we have a gentleman who, I always say former Buckeye. He's always a Buckeye. He'd tell you that. Bobby Carpenter joins us each and every Friday at this time. Bobby, good to see you, man, and welcome to a new Trademark Life.
Please tell me you agree this is ridiculous.
I've been a proponent of it being ridiculous for a long time.
Thank God.
Like, I understand, like, the Ohio State University, that's technically the name. And I love that the guys say it and all those different things, but the trademarking of a word, I can't get behind. And it's a little bit of, like, just the university overreach to me. They want to dominate everything, sell everything. So people sell shirts and stuff that just say the on. Well, Ohio State's not getting any royalties off of that. In the trademark and licensing department, they're not getting anything. And so they were pushing to ultimately get this done. And, after a couple of years battling in court, I forget who else was in there with them. They kind of agreed on a joint who had filed a trademark for it together. It was like a medical company or something else. And they had agreed to kind of share the usage of it. So, I mean, while it's entertaining, I enjoy the use of it. The actual trademarking of it, I think, might be a bit of an overreach.
Bobby, what's your stance on trademarking a letter? Should Miami now trademark the letter U for the U? Is that what's next, just to combat what's going on with Ohio State?
I guess that's where we're at now in society. I mean, I suppose so. I mean, here's the thing: like, they already have a trademark on their orange and green U that is, their mascot or one of their logos. Like, I would think that would be enough. But I guess if people probably make shirts down there and it just says the U on them, and Miami probably can't profit off of that because they're not getting any trademark and licensing dollars. So you know what? It wouldn't surprise me, gentlemen, if one day we ultimately see that happen.
Speaking of the Ohio State, quite the haul at receiver, thanks in large part to a guy I know that you've been praising, and everyone in college football that I've seen on social media has praised, Brian Hartline, and the work he's done with receivers at the Ohio State University. Bobby, what do you think about the guys you're bringing in now and the track record with Brian Hartline and what he's done with receivers?
Well, he's done a phenomenal job, and he took over and made Terry McLaurin, who was a 5-star guy. And Terry actually was in the weight room this morning at Ohio State. I was talking to him. He was a 5-star kid out of Indianapolis and got redshirted, which, like, the thought of redshirting someone today, I mean, oh my gosh, like, transfer, I'm a 5-star, I'm not going to play right away. But he's a great kid. Got there, and so Brian kind of took over the receiver room. His senior year was helping his junior year, and in doing so, helped develop him as an elite route runner. And now he's been the best thing the Washington Commanders have. And he's going to probably end up getting a deal that I would imagine have an average annual value of somewhere around 20 to 24, 25 million, because that's what the going rate is for number one receivers. So he's been able to do this with those guys. You saw, obviously, the 2 guys go in the first round last year. He was critical in the development of Jamison Williams before he went to Alabama. Jackson Smith and Jigba is most likely going to be a first rounder. And he went to school there. And that's the one thing. Like, guys, I don't know if I could ever be a college coach. Like, people have asked about it. And there were a couple of guys, and I always joked with Jason Witten about going back and taking over Tennessee. And I'm like, buddy, you're one of the few people that I could coach for that probably wouldn't be at my alma mater, just because I respect the type of man you are and everything that you understand, and my wife loves your wife, and that would make it easier because coaching wives, it's a tough business. But like when you're an alumnus of a university and you're the head coach or a coach there, and wide receivers coach, like you don't have to. It's not really so much of a sell as it is you're able to just tell about the experiences you had, what you're going to be able to do for them, and the track record is now there. And so, Brian, I don't know how he does that. I've watched him talk to some of these guys. You know, he had a nice NFL career, played 7-8 years. You know, had 2 seasons where he averaged 75 yards and 75 catches and 1,000 yards. Like, super talented guy, but he was really a grinder, and he's a great technician. I think a lot of players now look at this like, hey, I'm really talented. I can go here and play for this guy. He's going to get the most out of me. I'm at a university where I get a chance to, probably have a shot playing for national championships. And, it's a school that has a pretty good NIL situation. So it kind of, I think, just checks all the boxes. And I mean, Brian, I don't know how you could have, every kid he's getting is like a 4 and 5 star. He's out recruited Alabama over the last 4 to 5 years for receivers. Now, I don't know how that's even real because they seem to have the market cornered on just about everything. But the amount of top, ESPN top 100, top 300 guys, it's just ridiculous. So he's a great communicator. He's a fairly young dude. He'll get out there and still run around with them sometimes. I think guys just got to really appreciate that.
Bobby Carpenter with us on OutKick 360. I realize, Bobby, that Texas and Oklahoma don't join the SEC until 2024 or 2025. But I said yesterday it felt like with the commitment of Arch Manning that Texas officially joined the SEC yesterday. What was your reaction to Arch Manning selecting the Longhorns, and ultimately what does it mean for the program in terms of landing him over other programs?
That was big. It was big in Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma might have the NCAA men's baseball and softball champions when this is all done. I mean, they're on fire right now with what they've been able to do with their spring sports. And so they're bringing a lot more than just football ultimately to the SEC. But, with Arch Manning, here's the thing. I think Steve Sarkisian's a really good offensive mind to be a good head coach. Now, he's pretty good at Washington. Obviously USC, he had his issues there. But he went 5-7 last year at Texas. It wasn't like he set the world on fire and came in right away and, at least went 7-5 or 8-4. So, Arch Manning, him going there, that's been a lot of faith in a guy as a head coach who really doesn't have that track record of success. Now you look at, Alabama and Georgia, the other 2 finalists. All right, they're both defensive coaches. Georgia just won the national championship, for heaven's sake. But if you look at Nick Saban and what he's been able to do, I guess I don't know. Maybe that's depending on, do they think he'll be there for, 3, 4, 5 more years? I don't know. But I think that's a huge coup. It does. The Manning name is really, that's the first family of football. And it's especially the first family of football with regard to the SEC. When you start talking about, Archie and then, and Eli at Ole Miss, Coop going there, Peyton obviously at Tennessee, and for him to go to Texas while they just got Quinn Ewers going there, who is like the other can't miss generational prospect. Like, it's pretty remarkable. And I was on XM84 with Hester yesterday, Jacob Hester. We were talking about this, and I'm like, can you have 2 generational prospects, generational talents in the same generation, and then ultimately on the same team? Because that's what Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning are supposed to be. So it's a huge coup for them, but we'll see ultimately, will this pay dividends? Will they be able to, take Arch Manning, recruit around him, and get ready to go as they enter the SEC? Because his first year, as he gets in, they'll be joining the SEC during his tenure. And I think a lot of people are projecting that transition to be kind of bumpy if they don't get this thing off the ground and rolling.
Bobby, I know you and I were tweeting back and forth a little bit yesterday, and I think your response was very common compared to a lot of people's response was, why would he not go to Alabama or Georgia? It shocks people when someone chooses Texas, who lost to Kansas a year ago at home, over a program like Alabama and Georgia right now. And I see it and think, man, college football is only going to be truly, truly great and competitive again when shock isn't the reaction when a 5-star guy doesn't pick Alabama, Georgia, or Ohio State, or one of those programs. Like the fact that we're surprised that Texas could land Arch Manning is surprising to me, but it's also a testament to the dominance of the programs that I mentioned that were in competition for Arch Manning. That dominance needs to shift a little bit, quite frankly.
It does. And listen, I'm a proponent of that. I think college football is better when Texas is good. I think it's better when USC is good. It's better when, Miami and Florida State, like all these schools that have historically been good, they're good. And so hopefully this is that. But I was surprised, I guess, with the Mannings, and they do the research. They understand it. They got it. They know as well as anyone. They looked at this and said, hey, we trust Steve Sarkisian more as a head coach than we do Nick Saban. I know there's other factors that go into this. Like the Mannings, like NIL money, like that's all well and good. Those things are great. But like they realize like you're not stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. When you start talking about being a franchise quarterback, if you project out, 5-6 years of him getting drafted first round pick, and then who knows what the deals will look like when he's coming through, maybe, 50, 60, 70 million a year, 10 years from now, assuming he becomes the player everybody thinks. So like, yeah, it's a couple $1 million. Is that going to be good? Maybe you could get $500,000 more here versus there. Okay. But I think they're putting a great deal of faith. So they must obviously know and have a great deal of faith and a great understanding of what Steve Sarkisian can be. I'm not there fully yet with Sark. I'm more of a bird in the hand versus two in the bush, or maybe one in the car versus two in the bar. And I think they're just maybe rolling the dice a little bit here, because I know that Nick Saban would make Arch Manning the best football player he could ultimately be.
Do you think the SEC and is going to accelerate, maybe its TV partners accelerate Texas and Oklahoma coming into the conference? Or what's the deadline now? The 2025?
Yeah, 2025, yeah.
And Arch Manning's going to play most of his career in the Big 12.
I would think that they would try to accelerate this. The reality is, though, I know that they've got a pretty steep buyout with the Big 12. And I think that's what they're kind of looking at here. At some point, like Willie Nelson said, divorce is expensive because it's worth it in some situations. And maybe is it worth it if you're the SEC to be like, hey, we're going to help take some of the heat and burden some of this financial penalty for the Big 12 to get these two other massive schools to come in. And now the fact that Arch Manning is there, and maybe some schools are like, hey, leave him out there, we don't want to play him. But you have to think about what that would do for the entirety of the conference when you have a guy like that and all the storylines. Think about it. If Texas plays Tennessee, when Texas plays Ole Miss, they'll be flashing up and showing his family's names in the stadium, and then he's down there in the burnt orange for the Longhorns. Like, I mean, dude, you're talking about if those teams are good and decent, like talking about massive ratings and massive storylines being built in. The fact that he could be going against Nick Saban, I would tend to think that they would want to get this done sooner rather than later. And probably part of it is, gentlemen, is they got to figure out exactly how they're going to structure the conference, and structure whether it's the, is it the 7-1? Is it the 3? Is it the 6-3? How are they going to lock these games in? Are they going to add a ninth conference game? Like, there's so many questions that they still have to get figured out. And I know that's going to be the big push here, probably over the next calendar year. And then maybe once they get that, then maybe you can start figuring out exactly, hey, when we're going to bring them in, and maybe we bring them in a year early to help facilitate some of this.
Bobby, I ask you this question because I think you're going to have a very exact answer to it, and I'm fascinated by your answer to this. You are a former Ohio State Buckeye. You are a businessman also, and you're someone who played in the NFL. So you understand monetary value on someone. Take the recruiting aspect out of it, because I do not think that Arch Manning was given money to go to Texas. But I think that NIL was probably discussed at Texas and everywhere else he's going to go. But the Manning family knows that he's valuable. Arch Manning is what NIL was made for big, bankable advertising dollars on name, image, likeness, with his family, with his celebrity status, with the ratings of games he's going to play in. What is his value per year as the starting quarterback in Austin, Texas, in the burnt orange, with the Longhorn on the helmet, on CBS and ESPN night games and ABC night games, and with the name Manning? How much is he worth in NIL?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, you think about running ads with him in game, and gosh, I mean, this isn't like a local car deal or something like that. I mean, people at Ohio State were hoping like, hey, maybe you can get him to come to Columbus because Peyton has the deal with Nationwide, and that's where they're banked out of. And they could do like joint commercials, and that would be the headquarters. And it's like, well, what are you paying him? Something like that. I mean, well, what are you paying Peyton Manning to do that?
Yeah.
Peyton's not doing that for free. Like, I'm guessing he's probably getting there's at least there's two commas in it. I'll tell you that per year. Is it, $2.5, $3 million, like $4 million? I mean, assuming he becomes the player that you think, and he's at a place like Texas in the state that's the size of Texas, where they're probably gobbling up at least half of their college football fans, if not maybe 60%. And they have all those big alumni boosters, the geographic reach. Imagine them, like you said, they're in the SEC playing a Alabama night game. Like, those spots are going through the roof. And so you would want to have him tied in. And so you think about, AT&T's based out of, San Antonio. Why not throw him in an AT&T deal? And he can be doing the Stafford commercials and stuff like that. Because that's ultimately what you're talking about there is, a national and regional brand, as opposed to someone who's just going to be doing it in their local market. He has that reach where everybody knows the name. Everybody knows the Manning name. And he's at a school that everybody knows. And if he's performing and producing like that, and to be able to tie him to your company and put that out there, especially now in game while he's playing, I mean, that's incredibly valuable. I would say probably $5 million a year. I mean, it might even be more than that, but I would say,
and Bobby, that's probably two companies. I mean, you're talking about five. I'm really thinking he could just choose AT&T or Nationwide or Wendy's or whatever and make $2.5 million a year for 3 or 4 years while he's there as a starting quarterback. And then he limits himself in terms of how many commercials he's shooting and what he's endorsing. I mean, I think if you wanted to go to 3 or 4, we could be talking $8 to $10 million a year. I'm not talking about some sort of gift. That is fair market value for his name, image, likeness, and the celebrity he's going to be.
Oh, I'm looking at this as those companies are deriving that value from having him. Like, this isn't a gift.
Yes.
I think like their people would sit down is the same way they would sit down with Peyton Manning, or the same way, you pick your big celebrity athlete, Tiger Woods with Nike or whatever it might be. And they look at that and say, hey, what is the value that we're getting? I mean, Nationwide has Peyton Manning on there. Like, I mean, he's their guy. It's him and Brad Paisley, for heaven's sake. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, the value that you can get. Like, Tony Romo does Sketcher commercials nationally. He hasn't played in years. But like, when you have a familiar face like that, and you have a famous last name that everybody knows, like, and that's the thing. Whether and not understand, college football is a very regional sport. And so, yeah, and if you're in Texas, everyone in Texas knows you, and especially in the Southeast, the Big Ten's got a large following. Northeast, not as much. West Coast, not as much. But here's the thing. And it's not all attributed to him. I mean, some of this obviously was given at birth with his last name. But, I mean, Peyton Manning played in Denver. He played in Indianapolis. Eli played in New York, the biggest market. People know the Manning name. They know that you are going to be able to have geographic reach because of that. And so he's in a situation that's unique wholly unto itself because, unless Tom Brady has kids that are great, multiple ones of them, or, I'm trying to think of, father-son quarterback duos, brothers and all those things. Like, it's such a rarity for a name to have that much value to where, that Manning name, the brand power behind it's as strong as probably anyone in sports.
Bobby, since rookie contracts became slotted, not every guy in the 20s has the pocket money to throw down $50,000 or $75,000 for a rookie dinner. This has become a big topic of conversation. What do you think should be happening with these guys maintaining the tradition but maybe not bankrupting a kid early?
Well, the way I look at it is, here's the thing. Like, on my rookie dinner, I think it was probably around, I have the receipts still somewhere. I think it was like $11,500. And we had a first-round pick on defense, third-round pick, fifth-round pick, and a couple, like, seventh-round and a couple of free agents that made the team. And so, like, we kind of doled it out as far as, how much where you were at. I was the 18th pick. So I of that, like, 11,000, I think I paid like 7,500, or third-round pick paid like, 15, $2,000. Our fifth-round pick paid like 1,000. And then we had the free agents and seventh-round draft. They threw like $500. But here's the key too, like, our vets were there, and we had Aaron Glenn, Greg Allison. We didn't even have everybody that went because they're like, I've got family time. I had a game with my kids tonight or something. But, they also, a lot of the vets, hey, man, here's a couple $100, here's $500, whatever. We'll take care of the tip. And they threw in probably what ended up being, $3,000. So it's like, all right, we give the waitress, servers, great tip. We did it all. Like, they got some nice wine. We had some nice steaks. And then we all went out. And then the vets kind of took care of that, everything after that. Like, the only time where it got really bad in Dallas I saw was, like, Des Bryant was one of the first. He got hit for like $50,000. And the reason why is during training camp, he wouldn't carry any of the other receivers' pads. He didn't want to bring coffees and do all this stuff. And so, like, man, we're going to hit you up at the rookie dinner. Like, because it's about falling in line. Like, there is no like hazing anymore. There's none of that stuff. But there is like a rite of passage and understanding, like, dude, this is the best in the world, man. The football is the top gun of professional football. Like, a football, you're getting here. These guys are all elite. Everybody's gone through this. Peyton Manning carried pads. He did this. Tom Brady, all these guys, did these things. Terrell Owens, was carrying Jerry Rice's pads. Like, so everybody has done these things. And so it's just, I don't think it should get ridiculous. You get some of these guys who are kind of bitter, and I think, they try to take stuff out on rookies. Yeah, man, $50,000, that's absurd. And understand, we've got some inflation. Beef costs a lot more. The wine's probably more expensive. There's a bunch of things that we got to deal with in this country. But I would say, for first-round draft pick, shelling out $20,000, $15,000, and then, if you have other, defensive or offensive players, depending on how teams do it, some teams just do it with a unit, with their rookie or whatever, on one side of the ball or position group. But, you do that, it's like, all right, that's kind of your tribute to get in as a first-round draft pick, and not having everybody. $75,000 is ridiculous, but I'm in the camp, $10,000 to $20,000, man. Like, dude, you've got to this point. It's now you take care of the vets for one night, and in doing that, they will take care of you on the field. They share their knowledge, they share their wisdom, and they treat you with the respect that you deserve, as long as you're warranting it and showing up and working.
Bobby, we legitimately have 60 seconds left, but give me your order as a veteran as you sit down and it's rookie payment night at a nice dinner.
You're like my order, like, so I'm going to probably get tomahawk ribeye. I'm going to get probably a bottle of Camus. I'm not a big lobster guy, so I wouldn't get that. I might get some shrimp or something on the side.
Some scallions.
I love some steamed Brussels scallions, some steamed Brussels sprouts.
There we go.
Something like that. And then at the end of the night, I mean, I don't eat a lot of desserts, but if we're going to a nice steakhouse like a Nick and Sam's or a Papa Brothers in Dallas, I'm going to probably at the end of the night get like a nice, whatever their featured dessert is, creme brulee or like a big cake or something like that.
And then how many people are around the table on average?
We had our whole side of the ball on defense. So it's usually like 22, 23. Usually say they're going to come, and like my year's probably 18. So, I mean, you do that, and some guys get some bottles of wine. They get Louis the 13th, which is, $300 a shot. But like that stuff, it doesn't get that crazy. Like you realize, like, all right, like, okay, as a rookie, I'm adding up everything in my mind. I'm like, this is going to be so much.
Right.
And then I saw it, I was like, all right, dude, this is going to be probably my first paycheck in my rookie season, and then we'll be good.
And I'm sure the dinner was delicious, and this is why we asked the tough questions to Bobby Carpenter, so we can live vicariously through his history.
Immediately had an answer, too. He went rolling right through that order.
I think he took it easy on us on that order as well.
I did too. It's making me hungry, though.
At BCarp3 is where you can find him. Bobby, thank you for the time, always on time and making time for the show on Fridays. We appreciate it.
Have a good trip.
You guys too. Enjoy it.
Thanks,
right.
Bobby.
Bobby Carpenter every Friday with us. One of my favorite team other than the Braves, because the Braves run every night. Seattle Mariners. And if you can tie in a stat with the 2000, 2001, 2002 Seattle Mariners stretch run there with Griffey and Buhner and Edgar Martinez and others, you've got my attention. Paul's got a stat that compares a team this year and what the Mariners did
in their prime.
In the prime time of the steroid era. Connect me to the steroid era next on OutKick 360.
Inject it.
So the Yankees are on a tear right now. OutKick 360 rolls on. That goes without saying. They're on pace, I believe right now, if they're not a game behind, they're a game in front of where the Mariners were in 2001. That team with Griffey and everyone that won like 113 games and then bowed out in the playoffs pretty quickly after that. But point being, that was a fun regular season on the ESPN Wednesday night doubleheader, Sunday night baseball, where that lineup was on all the time. And we're beginning to see that more often with the Yankees. And you know, even last night, they're down 3-0, 6-3. They come back to win 7-6 and a walk-off by Aaron Judge. Paul, tie it into the Mariners a decade later because they're on the same tear with walk-offs.
Well, these were the 2009 Mariners actually hold the Major League Baseball record for walk-offs in a season, 13, which sounds like a massive number, right? To win 13 games in the ninth inning and to walk off. The Yankees got their 9th walk-off last night. That was the Aaron Judge hitting a single to drive in a run. To win a game that I thought they had no business winning. That puts them on pace. I did the math. I got out the old calculator for 20. They could, I don't know that they keep up the pace. They're on pace for 20 walk-off wins this year, which would, kill the record of 13. Just ridiculous numbers that they keep putting up. I've got a second one here. I've got to go find my bookmarks on Twitter.
So 2001, just going back earlier in time to that record. So they're on pace, the Yankees right now, for 120 wins. The 2001 Mariners were 116-46. That's how dominant that team was then and how dominant the Yankees are this season, Paul.
Here's another one.
I mean, you can actually remember all their losses at this point. We're almost to the 4th of July, and I feel like if you're a Yankees fan that watches every game, you could probably mentally go back and remember the games they've lost. That's how few times they've lost. They've got 18 losses. They're 34 games over 500 right now. Ridiculous.
I failed to properly bookmark this other thing. Let me see if I can find it real fast. By the way, the Toronto Blue Jays have changed that hat. So it doesn't have red, white, and blue, the July 4th hat. It's just kind of bluish.
Now it's just the color of the team.
It's in line with the theme, but it's not a 4th of July hat anymore. Yankees are the only team in baseball that has a winning record in games where they trail at any point. They're 20-18.
Brent Hubbs next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on from 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Happy Friday to you. Coming up, we discuss Freddie Freeman's return to Atlanta with the LA Dodgers and his reaction at a press conference that just wrapped up. We've got that. We will also hit the headlines, including Edgerrin James and a prediction for his son playing with Arch Manning. And it's not at Texas. We say hello to Brent Hubbs, who covers UT, the University of Tennessee, for Volquest.com, and we hit SEC headlines as well. We'll start with Arch. Brent, hope you're doing well, man.
I am. I'm doing great. Hope you guys are.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll ask you the same thing I asked Bobby Carpenter earlier. We know Texas and Oklahoma, they're coming to the SEC, but yesterday, Arch Manning selecting Texas felt like the Longhorns officially joined the Southeastern Conference. I don't know your initial reaction to it, but what do you think about the decision from Arch Manning to select Texas over places like Alabama and Georgia?
Well, it felt like it was an SEC move for Texas because, I mean, let's face it, that's the first family of SEC football at the quarterback position. The idea that a Manning is not playing in the SEC seems really foreign. What's interesting is if David Cutcliffe had not been at Ole Miss, I think Eli Manning would have played at Texas and not played in the SEC. But because David Cutcliffe was at Ole Miss and Peyton's relationship with David and how much Archie and Olivia think of David, that's why he ended up at Ole Miss. But, yeah, I mean, it feels like Arch Manning's supposed to be in the SEC, and obviously he will be when he's at Texas. I think the fact that Steve Sarkisian is an offensive coach, the offensive head coach who's planning on being there for a while. Not that Nick Saban or Kirby Smart's leaving, but those are defensive guys, and their offensive coordinators are, they may revolve down there. We know at Alabama they've had plenty who have come through. Now they've all been successful, but they haven't had the same guy as their coordinator, and who knows how long Monken's going to stay with Kirby Smart. He's getting paid well, but you never know when he might get a head coaching opportunity. So I think the idea that they were going to play for an offensive-minded head coach was important. Peyton played for Philip Fulmer, former offensive coordinator, former offensive line coach, and he played for David Cutcliffe, who's obviously his offensive coordinator. And then Eli goes to Ole Miss and plays for an offensive-minded head coach. And I think those things were probably important and something that they looked at in the recruiting process.
And I'll get your take on this too, Brent. I don't feel as though this played a big factor, but this just feels better than a Manning on the back of a jersey at Alabama or at Georgia, personally. Like, if you just think through, like, he didn't burn Ole Miss or Tennessee by selecting Alabama or Georgia. He's going to Texas, and while he didn't select those schools, Texas feels pretty neutral right now, all things considered.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, when he didn't consider Ole Miss and he didn't consider Tennessee, you certainly didn't want Tennessee fans and Ole Miss fans didn't want him playing against a rival school in the league, and that's not to say that's not to slight Texas in any way, but that was more of a neutral landing zone, if you will. That you're right, it didn't play a factor in the decision, in my opinion, but it probably made the pill a little easier to swallow in Oxford, Mississippi, and in Tennessee. And I'll give Arch and the Manning family credit that they never let it drag on that either one of those schools were going to be a factor for Arch Manning. And so I think because of that probably took a little sting out of it yesterday. But I know that there's a lot of people in the Grove and there's a lot of people on Rocky Top are going, at least he's not at Alabama or Georgia.
Well, and look, that's his uncle is Peyton, but he never really considered Tennessee. So I understand some Tennessee fans say, well, wait a minute, why didn't Tennessee even get in the mix here? But I am shocked at the lack of negative response to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss in this. You just said it. He wanted to play for an offensive-minded head coach. Here is your offensive-minded head coach at both your dad, your uncle Eli, and your granddad's alma mater. And Ole Miss didn't have a shot in this, it felt like, when it came down to the Final Three. Why are more people not talking about the failures of Lane Kiffin in this recruitment of Arch Manning?
Well, I think because they were never, if you're an Ole Miss fan and you're a Lane Kiffin fan, your response is Arch never gave him a chance. So how's that Lane Kiffin's fault if Arch wouldn't even come to campus and talk to him and see him? So Lane Kiffin didn't do anything wrong, much the same way with Tennessee, never gave him a chance. And so I think because of the way he went about that, it took some of the sting away for the fans. It took any took the negative backlash away from the Manning family. And quite frankly, it doesn't put any pain or any backlash on Lane Kiffin or Josh Heupel, because the kid never gave him a chance. He never let him in the door to recruit him. And that's obviously his decision. I'm not being critical of that. But I think because of that, Ole Miss fans who are all in for Lane, even though everybody knows Lane would like to get out of Oxford, they're like, hey, he didn't give us a chance. That's his loss because we got the best head coach around, right? And so I think that's why you don't see a real negative backlash or whatever for Lane Kiffin, Arch Manning, or anybody from the Ole Miss standpoint.
I know you guys at Volquest, you broke the news about the expanded plan for Neeland Stadium with an expanded budget now for Danny White and what's happening with construction and the renovation of Neeland Stadium. Brent, if you can, kind of walk us through what changes are being made and how the changes to the changes came about.
Well, the expanded budget is to handle cost as much as anything right now, because this project they're in the middle of with the club seats and with the video board in the north end, you know, the price of material and the price of labor is continuing to rise. And so part of the expanded budget is just to handle cost. Danny White made it clear when I sat down and talked with him back in May and we talked about facilities, he does not want to stop with the renovations in Neeland Stadium. And what he means by that is he wants to do something every year. What exactly that is, we'll have to see. Okay, you can't bite off more than you can chew in a 9-month period to get done before you play football again. But he does not want to do this project and then take 4 years off to raise money and then start another project. He wants the projects on the book with the state. He wants the state bonding issue handled, and he wants to move forward with something next year. What that something is, it remains to be seen. I think that's something they are trying to finalize and want to finalize here in the coming months. Now, they laid out strategies, South Concourse, East Concourse. I know Wi-Fi is at the top of the list. Wi-Fi is not on this current project that's being done right now. That will be something that will be done next year. But in terms of what the major brick and mortar construction is next year, we'll see. I know he wants to do the super suites because that's premium seating that's going to put more money back into renovation. So I think what you'll see from what gets done next will be something that can bring more money back into the stadium. So it'll be some kind of premium seating in some capacity. We'll just have to wait and see what they finalize to see what the next phase is. But he does not want to stop really over the next 3 to 5 years with renovations in the offseason to the stadium.
What's capacity after all of this?
They announced it at 101 something. You know, I don't think anybody's ever going to sit in there and count. So I don't know if I don't know that there's 101,000 places to put your rear end. I don't think there is. I don't think there was 102,455, which I'm convinced maybe it's been a number that Butch Jones thought rolled off the tongue real well when he came up with that number as a part of his marketing strategy. So, you know, what the number really is and what the number really has been for a while is up for debate and up for, you know, a lot of people to suggest. But Tennessee announced it a little over 101. They lost seats, Paul, in the north end when they put the Jumbotron in, they lost some seats there. Now they gained some of those back by those standing room only seats. And then when you go to a chairback seat in the new West Side clubs, they're probably not 18 inches wide like those bleachers were that you had to try to squeeze in there. So that's where you lose some seats and drop it down from 102,455. It didn't roll off my tongue as well, down to 101, a little over 101.
So we've seen some other schools with head coaches and athletic departments push donations to collectives. Ohio State has done this, among others. Tennessee has remained silent from a university athletic department, football program, basketball program side of this as it pertains to Spire, the collective with Tennessee. Brent, do you think that's because of what is still technically an ongoing NCAA investigation? Do you foresee Tennessee and Danny White at some time in the near future, if things with the NCAA goes away, pushing fans to donate to Spire or other collectives?
Yeah, I think that look, Danny White's on record again with comments that he gave to me that he was comfortable with Spire, that they had a good partnership. I know Spire and the university meet on a regular basis, so the idea that they've been cut off and nobody talks to them is not fair or is not accurate. But you're right, Josh Heupel and Tony Vitello and other coaches on Tennessee's campus have not come out and publicly solicited donating to a collective, whether it's Spire or any other collective out there. And I think that the reason for that is because of the notice of allegations from the NCAA has not come yet. That's not done. And obviously the Nico thing was very high profile, which generated a lot of eyeballs on Tennessee and a lot of eyeballs on Spire. So I think at this point, that's kind of why Tennessee has been silent. Now, my question is this. Notice of allegations doesn't end an investigation. That really kind of starts it, to be honest with you, because you get your notice of allegations from the NCAA, and then you have to go and you respond to them, and then you go get your punishment. And that's ask Kansas, ask LSU, that is a lengthy process. It is not something that gets done in short order. So how long can Tennessee, in the arms race that is the SEC, go without publicly endorsing someone and publicly soliciting funds by their coaches into the NIL campaigns for current student athletes? That's a great question. I mean, Ryan Day is doing meet and greets and he's doing, exclusive Q&As with members of their collective and he's all in. He's also on record saying he needs $13 million a year to run his football program. So we'll see how long Tennessee will remain patient with this and go about it in this capacity. But I do not anticipate Josh Heupel anytime in the next few months standing up and saying publicly, hey, donate to Spire.
Brent, were you surprised to see Kennedy Chandler go in the second round last night? And is it fair to question Chandler and think, man, he could have made a good bit of money to come back to Tennessee for one more year, probably more than he'll make in the G League if he was going to be a second-round pick?
Well, I think, he wasn't going to hurt it. If he stayed healthy, he wasn't going to hurt his stock by coming back for another year because his shot was going to get better. His ability to finish at the rim would be better. The ability to get, getting stronger, those types of things would have gotten better. His lack of height hurt him, his free throw shooting. He needed to tighten up his ball skills. There are certainly things he could work on. I know some people felt like he was not going to be a first-round pick. Then there were a lot of people who felt like he would go late in the first round. So could he have helped himself if he'd have come back? Yeah. Does Kennedy Chandler feel that way today? Not based on his tweet. He said the feedback he got from everybody was that he wasn't tall enough and that he wasn't going to get any taller by coming back to Tennessee for another year. But there's no doubt if he stayed healthy, his stock would be higher a year from now than where it was last night when the draft took place.
There's a tie-in with Kennedy Chandler to a player that Rick Barnes in Tennessee is currently recruiting in five-star small forward from Philly, Justin Edwards, in that Rick Barnes doesn't often get overly personally involved in a single player's recruitment the way he did with Kennedy Chandler. And Brent, is he getting that personally involved now in the recruitment of Justin Edwards, this five-star player out of Philadelphia?
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's been to see him play a whole lot, and he's in constant or a lot of communication with him. I think Justin wanted to be recruited that way. I think the head coach relationship was really important. I think Rick Barnes and him hit it off well early on, and I think there's a lot of comfort there. And I think they've had a lot of good conversations. And Tennessee's obviously deep in that one, and it's because of Rick Barnes. And I think Tennessee will be there till the finish line. Rick Barnes recruits. I don't want to suggest that he doesn't recruit, but there's sometimes with guys that he's not, disinvested in, particularly early on in their recruitment. But where this recruitment has gotten to, Rick Barnes is very involved. He's been on the road a bunch to see him. He did the same thing with Josiah. He went and saw Josiah Jordan-James quite a bit as well. So we've seen it some, but this is a guy that Rick Barnes obviously likes, feels like he's very important to their program. He is their number one target on the board, and he's doing everything he can to try to land him.
Brent Hubbs, Volquest.com with us. I know Hendon Hooker is at the Manning Passing Academy. Is Nico there by chance?
Nico's in Knoxville for an official visit this weekend, and I do not think he's going to the Manning Passing Academy. I don't know that, but I've not heard that he's going and being a part of that. So to my knowledge, no.
And the official visit, is that as much as just a reassurance, or is this helping personally recruit other guys who may be in town?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more about having him in town here for Nathan Laycock, who is a wide receiver from North Carolina that's in town for an official visit, that got to know Nico a good bit at the recent 7-on-7 tournament out in Las Vegas. I think it was to have him in town for Francis Mauigoa, who is the offensive lineman from American Samoa that Nico's family knows well. And I think, Francis's family's in town, Nico's family's in town, and I think that's obviously by design. Nico was in town when Francis made an unofficial visit without his parents a month ago, and now the whole family's in town for both Nico and for Francis to spend the weekend together. And I think that was a big part of that is trying to land Francis. He's an offensive tackle from IMG Academy, and he is to me, he's the top priority on Tennessee's offensive board right now because you want protection help, and he's a guy that knows Nico, and the two have a good relationship with each other. So getting both of them in the boat would certainly be a nice thing for Tennessee.
Chad, based on those details, it's hard to screw up that visit.
You would think so, but there was a lot of optimism around Carnell Tate also from IMG Academy. Brent, how big of a blow was Carnell Tate for Tennessee when he decided this week to go to Ohio State?
Well, it was tough. I mean, he's a 5-star receiver, talented player. He knows Nico. He's always liked Ohio State. He liked Ohio State before Tennessee ever got involved with him. And so Cody Burns, Tennessee's former wide receivers coach, who's now with the Saints, did a good job creating a relationship there. When he left, a lot of people thought Tennessee might be out. Kelsey Pope did a good job picking that one up and moving forward. We know NIL was going to be and is a factor there. That's something that was important to Carnell Tate. I think Ohio State changed their NIL game. Interesting, Ryan Day asked for $13 million from his donor base, because he needs that for his football roster and for recruiting, for NIL deals moving forward, for incoming players and things of that nature. So I think once Ohio State's NIL opportunities, once he got to Columbus, were similar to what Tennessee's opportunities were once he got to Knoxville. I think he went back to where his heart was. And we've talked about this. Lane Kiffin has come out and said every kid's going to make a decision based on NIL. I don't buy that. When the numbers are very comparable, the kid's going to go with his heart. He's going to go with his gut. And I think Carnell has always liked Ohio State. But yeah, that was a blow to Tennessee, not to get him. But Tennessee's moving on. Nathan Laycock. I don't sweat the receiver position as bad in terms of if they miss out on somebody there, simply because Josh Heupel's offense has always produced really good receivers. Even guys you never heard of were very productive. Guys who are not very highly decorated, highly recruited were very productive, whether it was at Oklahoma, whether it was at Missouri, Central Florida, and obviously what we saw out of Cedric Tillman a year ago. Now, you got to have talent. I'm not suggesting that you can just go out and get any Tom, Dick, and Harry off the street and turn him into a 1,000-yard receiver. But I think this scheme lends for receiver success if a guy can run. And I think there's a good number of those guys out there.
Brent Hubbs, Volquest.com, with complete coverage of all things Tennessee athletics, SEC topics on the board as well. Brent, thank you as always, man. We appreciate you. Have a great weekend.
Good to see you.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Have a good
Brent.
one.
There he is, Brent Hubbs, at Brent_Hubbs. I think on behalf of him, I'd say follow him, but he never tweets.
Yeah.
He uses it for Volquest promotion, so you can just follow Volquest.
Yeah, follow Austin Price. We'll
Yeah.
say that. Austin tweets a
There you
lot.
go.
Austin Priceless is who you should
You
follow.
can follow Brent
accidentally-
Hubbs at Austin Priceless.
Yeah, I accidentally tweeted Austin was joining us, and Davey texted me I think that I don't know the difference between the two, as opposed to
Oh, he's probably right.
typoed it.
Well, and also, to be fair, it'll be Austin that'll be tweeting. So it's fine just to,
yeah.
to
Either way,
plug
Austin
either way.
retweeted it immediately.
Yeah.
Austin
Took the credit.
When's the last time Austin joined us?
Austin's got long summers.
He's big into like
2 weeks ago?
teasing his public. He loves taking little photos of like the bottom third of a sign at a restaurant.
Yeah.
And like putting eyeballs up there, like getting people to guess where he is.
He's trying to be Lane Kiffin.
He does.
Yesterday, he posted a interstate photo with traffic cones. He's like, "Where am I?" Eyeball emojis all over the place.
And he thinks everyone all around is like, where is he?
Well, they are, because he's
You have
going
to
to
guess.
cover recruiting.
Yeah.
So he knows Tennessee fans are going to start drooling, thinking where he is because someone's about to commit to Tennessee.
It's the same concept that Kiffin uses whenever he just
Oh,
tweets
I mean, the
out
amount of people that respond,
airport
like,
he's at.
that looks like I-24 right outside of Murfreesboro. He's going to Oakland. Tennessee's going to nail this kid right now. They're not going to nail him, but they're going to nail him in terms of getting him to
See
school.
where your mind
Yeah.
goes.
They're going to get him in school.
Trying to pull
That's
the
what I
Barkley
bet.
over here.
Yeah. They're going to get him in school.
Coming up,
You're going to get him.
Freddie Freeman, if he stops crying,
He's very
will
emotional.
play tonight
guy's gotta
as the
get himself
Dodgers take
together.
on the Braves. We'll explain the emotional press conference and the red carpet that the Braves have laid out for him in his return to Atlanta. That's next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. Edgerrin James has a prediction that his son's going to play with Arch Manning in the league.
It's kind of silly. Like they're
It's
32 teams.
It reminds me of Penny Hardaway and the predictions that he's had about coaching players that he in the NBA that he coached in the high school level that would follow him to Memphis. This was back whenever he was a high school coach in Tennessee. And it's very hard to pull off. But if we did have the Manning-James combo at some point, that'd be pretty cool.
And where's Edge's kid? I mean, Edge's kid isn't a guarantee.
No, he's not on the Arch Manning status. But if you're son of a Hall of Famer, you're getting looks from certain programs. Probably to you.
He's going to Howard, and he had offers from like Air Force. Indiana was his biggest offer that I saw. I went up and looked up his offer. He was a 3-star player, but I think Indiana was the biggest offer that he received.
He finished high school early so that he can roll at Howard for the spring semester, and he drew rave reviews for his performance in Howard's spring game, which I put a lot of stock into.
Well, I don't doubt the son of Edgerrin James can play football one bit, by the way. So
I'm sure he's a good football player, but if he was Arch Manning level football player, he'd be playing somewhere bigger than Howard.
Well, true. But the difference will be whenever he is an undrafted free agent and signs wherever Arch goes, then Edgerrin can say,
"Yeah, they were teammates. They were." My prophecy came true.
Speaking of offers, the Braves made a strong offer to Freddie Freeman, which he would not sign an extension at the time, a year and a half ago. Became a free agent, ends up in Los Angeles, overplayed his hand, doesn't get the deal that he wanted in Atlanta, anywhere close to what he ends up signing for in L.A., and he officially returns to Atlanta tonight as a Dodger after winning the World Series with the Braves a year ago. And, Chad, you were watching the press conference and the media availability he had today in Georgia. It is emotional is an understatement. He was like Jaden Ivey last night, who just couldn't stop crying with just thinking about the memories of everything with Atlanta, and it took him a while to even sit down at the podium.
Yeah, this is courtesy of Maria Martin, who's a reporter in Atlanta, is actually married to one of my friends from Mount Juliet. Actually played ball with his older brother growing up, to Levi Brown, former Troy quarterback and Buffalo Bills quarterback.
Yeah.
But so Maria posted this video. This is not a press conference. This is like a visit to the cry room that you look at. And I love Freddie Freeman.
Get it together.
Loved him as a player. He is an emotional guy. I can't help but watch this and think two very strong things about this video. And there's another one that you're going to see if you're watching right now, too, where he is actually pacing before the press conference because he can't bring himself to say words. He's crying so much before the press conference begins. Two things. One, I feel great if I'm a Brave or a Braves fan when I see that. Like, man, we really had an impact on this guy in the 15 years he was here.
I thought you meant like,
and if you're a Braves player,
take the money line.
Well, that maybe. I mean, he's one guy. Like, their pitcher could be lights out and it's over. So he is one position player. But if he was pitching tonight, I'd definitely take the money line. Two, how do you feel if you're the Dodgers? Isn't this a little over the top?
Three, you could have stayed for a better offer.
This is a guy, well, he here's the problem. He wanted to stay.
Pacing.
Chipper Jones, here's pacing Freddie right now if you're watching. He wanted to stay. This has been documented by Chipper Jones. His agent, I'm sure, was pushing him to hold out for more, hold out for more, hold out for more. Around the All-Star break last year, Alex Anthopoulos and the Braves came back and said, this is the final offer. We're not going above this. This is what we've reached. And he talked to Chipper Jones, and Chipper said, if you want to stay a Brave, this is really good money. Take this offer and stay, because he said, I know Alex, and if you don't sign this offer, he is going to go and find an alternative. And he did that. He signed Matt Olson. So I think Freddie Freeman thought it's the last second that he was going to sign, that they were going to come up with something or something was going to happen. he had to go sign somewhere else after the Braves traded for Matt Olson and signed him to play first base. So
a little naive.
I don't know if it's naive, Paul, as much as Freddie Freeman is on. Probably we love Mount Rushmores on this show, but of Braves players, he may be on the Mount Rushmore of all-time Braves.
So he didn't think they'd replace him?
He's that good, so he overplayed his hand.
Well, that's a little naive.
Yeah.
Well, we could be saying that too about Aaron Judge if he ends up having a very average year after turning down the money with the Yankees, but he's doing the opposite. By the way, Freeman is hitting nearly 500 over his last 7 games, but over his last 30 games, his average is 282.
What's Olson doing?
Olson's been on fire lately. I
Same
don't
as
have
Freddie.
his numbers in front of me, but he's been on a tear. The Braves are like 18-3, I think, in the last 21, and he's been very good in that stretch. Freddie Freeman also went yard on the first pitch he saw from the Braves at Dodger Stadium this year.
This makes me like him far less.
Oh,
far less.
I see. This is immediately what I think. So, the emotion attached to the return tells you how much playing there meant to him, but also I think it describes the emotion and vitriol behind the Braves at the time signing Matt Olson and moving on from Freddie. Right? Like there's this.
It hurt.
Chad's right. Like there are only a handful of players that you, without a shadow of a doubt, if they just sign the contract, they go down as an all-time great, no matter what happens over the duration of the next contract for what they meant to get to that point. You know, like I look at this and think what could have been, because if he ends up being a lifer in Atlanta.
You hate this too, though. Come on.
If you crack, if you crack during this or have a slow start and say this is hard for me, that's one thing. But then it goes on and on and on, and he can't gather himself.
Here's the thing.
It's also kind of like to a slight defense of him, and I don't love it either. But crying at times is kind of like sweating. Like when you start sweating, sometimes you don't stop for a while. And I think if you get choked up, it can be hard to regain yourself.
Crying like this is for a funeral.
Well,
it is a funeral.
Unexpected death. Unexpected death.
I'm not describing the crying. The emotions behind it, though, tells you what he was saying. It was very genuine a year ago in regards to the city.
I didn't doubt him then.
The love for him and the city is unquestioned.
He's
going to
get a huge ovation.
What I hate, Chad, is the way the Braves have handled this. Not Freddie Freeman. You told me based on some a tweet or something that they've given him his old parking spot. Like I told you during the break, that car should be on blocks when he gets back out to that car.
So, a couple things here that this is following Braves Twitter here, people that report on the team. He also said on his drive in, I guess he's got a car there, or he's driven from the team hotel. On his drive in or his way into the ballpark today, he saw 17 Braves Freddie Freeman jerseys.
But who's counting?
Exactly. He was very specific about the number 17. And he said the parking lot attendant for the Braves that he knows met him at the gate and escorted him to his old parking spot.
Now, if I'm the guy who has that parking spot now, I would have been like, what the hell? I'm on this team now.
What if it's Matt Olson
not.
That has it?
Yeah. And the guy said, hey, I'm going to save this spot for Freddie Freeman today. I would have said, why?
What if Matt Olson double parks Freddie Freeman because he's in his spot? He just goes right up to his bumper and parks right behind him, and then he can't get out.
Yeah.
And the Braves
an Uber
win tonight.
home tonight.
The Dodgers, trying to get out of the park, and Freddie Freeman can't leave.
Take an Uber home
because Matt
tonight.
Olson's parked right behind him.
The only way I respect this is if this is the long play to get in his head even more, and like the emotions came out after he parks in his old spot. I mean, they're going to let him get dressed in his old locker for the game.
Here's your old jock strap. Here's your old jock strap.
Based on the way he's acting, I don't even know if he's going to be able to play.
Well,
I agree. Emotional scratch.
After the 7-minute delay for the press conference because of his emotions, he said it's going to be even more emotional when they give him the ring right before the game.
Oh, God.
They're going to do a ring presentation for his World Series ring. Then he's got a bat in the first inning.
No. He bet about him. He's bet about him fourth hitter. And hope for 1, 2, 3 inning.
I mean, how?
So he can compose himself.
I guess when you get out there and play, it's going to be different.
I don't know.
When he goes through his routine of getting an on-deck circle and everything, but it's going to be a huge ovation that he's going to step out and give tip the cap to the fans, and he's going to start crying again.
Like a water fountain.
Can you imagine if they go high and tight first pitch?
Your mind works similar to mine, and that's evil at times. And I keep thinking, like, what if the Braves just played beanball with Freddie Freeman to start the game?
Unless this is the total long con of just trying to tear at any emotion possible, because he's been on a tear at the plate.
The
I think they
Dodgers
should play like a
7
crying
games.
baby on the
So,
screen.
the Dodgers also are incredible, like the Yankees, from a top-down
Well, not that much.
roster. I mean, if the baseball
Yes.
doesn't work out this way, but if the two best teams in the game were to play in the World Series, it is a bi-coastal Dodgers-Yankees World Series right now. But again, that's not always how baseball works out.
I also I don't like all the sobbing here, Chad. You are correct on that. What I do like, what I'm conflicted on personally is I do appreciate the fact that a player actually cares.
Yeah.
Aaron Judge, if he leads New York, is not going to really care. He's going to take the money, but he's not leaving New York. They're going to play this way different. But I'm conflicted simply because in a day and age where guys are all over the place and they don't really care where they are unless they're in the moment, I appreciate the fact that the guy, liked where he was playing and realizes you could tell
I love it.
He feels as though he made the wrong choice.
It's what you
based
want.
on the reaction.
Yes, and it's what you want and it's crazy too because he's from L.A. That's where he grew up. Atlanta's been his professional home, but he's from L.A.
He's going to cry when he gets back to L.A. because he likes it so
Honest
much.
question, though. How many people care that much about a place they're at right now in baseball or in the past? Did Albert Pujols ball for 15 minutes when he came back to St. Louis?
I think he likes
as
it
an
a
Angel?
lot in St. Louis. I think he can handle returning without weeping
Well, he came back.
for
He's
25
back now,
minutes.
right? Or he was
Yes.
recently. But I'm saying when he came back as an Angel, I need to go back.
He got a
through-
big ovation.
I need to go back to the annals of returns of baseball players to cities they spent more than a decade and were great players to see what the emotion was like.
He got a huge ovation. The catcher stepped out and walked in front of the plate and dilly-dallied, so the ovation was big, and he didn't cry for 10 minutes.
I just saw a tweet from The Comeback. MLB World reacts to Freddie Freeman's emotional return to Atlanta. Now I'm clicking on this to see what has been tweeted and what's been said.
Dodgers, by the way, are a lot like the Yankees if you think it's a lot like them to be 9 games worse.
Well, from a roster standpoint, I'm saying they're very similar.
Chad, what did he actually say? Did he
He
actually
didn't choke out
compose
many words.
sentences in this?
Said,
I mean, that's what it looks like.
excuse me, I gotta go pace.
He's
I mean, has a millionaire ever cried this much?
not since an acting job.
Yeah.
Those millionaires cry all the time on command for money. They cry that much. He said, so all I've seen quote-wise, he talked about the parking lot attendant. He told that story.
That was a big story. That was Act 1.
Everything. I just in my mind, I'm thinking of everything the Braves are doing, and then they're going to throw high and
I'm
tight.
looking at this story because it's just a bunch of people tweeting.
They're going to get him as emotionally drained as possible, and just go straight head hunting.
He said, "I miss you, Jenny." It's the Forrest Gump crying scene.
Stacy Wheeler says, guess it affected him more than I thought. We know who Stacy Wheeler is.
He also did
But it's in the
the
story.
Mystic River scene. Is that my daughter in there?
That my daughter, Sean. That
Yeah.
my daughter, Sean. Is it Sean that he's yelling at? I think that's Kevin Bacon's character. The only thing that I saw that he said was, how do you close this chapter? Or how difficult is it to close this chapter? And he started crying through his answer again. But he said, I haven't closed anything. I will never close this place off.
It's close. There's 70 games into the season.
Again, how do you feel if you're the Dodgers? That's the awkward one to me now. Like his teammates are the Dodgers. Like,
Say,
man,
hey, you collecting those paychecks or no?
I get it. You going to be all right? Hey, bub, you going to be all right to play first base for us tonight? Or do I need to step in?
So he just for those that want to follow the emotional return. I mean, what's he like tomorrow too? Like
Spent.
Oh,
He's spent
fine.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
He's spent. He
but
probably needs a day
maintenance
off.
Okay, so
Maintenance day tomorrow.
here's the final. So they play
Load management.
7:20, 7:15, and 7:08. each of the next 3
Got to
nights.
have 3 different
So they're
times.
on Sunday Night Baseball?
Sunday Night Baseball, yep. So it'll be on
Makes
ESPN Sunday. Chad, your prediction of the Freddie Freeman performance, the production at the plate.
I think you'll do Freddie Freeman things.
So first at bat earlier this season in LA, you know,
Home run. Yeah, it went deep. I think it was the first or second pitch that he saw was a home run. I remember watching that bat live when it happened. I think he'll go deep at least once.
All right,
this
so
weekend.
when he goes yard, what's the reaction like in the stadium?
Oh, standing ovation.
I mean,
Can you imagine?
They'll go crazy. They'll all cry. They'll all cry.
Can you imagine the reaction now? If he goes deep and he starts rounding the bases?
as a Braves fan, if it's like electric applause,
Oh, it'll be crazy.
then I am really pissed at whoever's there.
What are the odds? There are decent odds.
Will they fire?
Jared Stillman, who I'm about to go on his radio show,
He's
is going to
there.
be there tonight, and he's an emotional Braves fan.
Will they-
I'll have to ask him if he's going to cry, or if he's going to cheer or boo.
I'm going to cry. I'm going to cry.
If Freddie Freeman goes deep, I hope you don't cheer.
He'll cheer.
I don't think the response is to boo him at any point, even if it's a homer. But if he hits a homer, don't cheer if you're a Braves fan.
They'll cheer.
That's
I
the
mean,
other team
If
hitting
you
a home
give him
run.
his parking spot, are they going to fire off fireworks for him if he hits a homer?
What do they play?
They're going to upgrade the car.
Yeah.
Whatever his song was when they hit a home run, what if they start playing that? They fired up like Wild Thing in the
Fireworks.
Major League movies just to get it going again. I hope none of those things happen. And I hope, as a Braves fan, I hope he has a terrible weekend at the plate.
Yeah.
But I think he'll continue. I think once the baseball starts, he will focus in and be fine, and he'll hit like Freddie Freeman
He's
hits.
going to hit a grand slam tonight that gives them a lead, and the place is going to go berserk.
I hope not. I hope they throw back the baseball. Whoever catches it, if he hits a grand slam.
They're going to sell that baseball for thousands of dollars.
Maybe the parking lot
to
attendant
each
will
other.
get it.
I'm just excited to be interested in a Major League Baseball game over the weekend. Not excited about the Stanley Cup final matchup tonight because I think it ends tonight as Colorado hosts Tampa Bay, unfortunately. But we got the Stanley Cup final and the Braves on TV. I'll be tuned in if I have a choice of Freddie Freeman at the plate. One of the things that helped Texas with Arch Manning wasn't that big of a deal. We'll explain specifically what that is coming up on OutKick 360. I just realized the Hornets last night conducted a draft. They didn't even have a head coach. OutKick 360 rolls on.
No problem.
They've named one, like the fourth or fifth option.
Well, Kenny Atkinson turned him down to stay an assistant coach in Golden State, right?
Wow.
One of their former assistants, I think, has returned to coach them. Steve Clifford.
Michael Jordan runs a top-notch organization.
Well, the way they've handled it, they don't even
I
get
love
to.
Michael Jordan, but man,
No,
it
you don't
not
even
gone
get to.
well.
But the weird thing is, you don't even talk to MJ until the
After
group,
you get the job.
No, the group like finalizes who they want to hire, and then they set up a meeting with Jordan, and that's how they set that up with the Warriors assistant. And then after the meeting, he turned them down.
You can't say he's too hands-on.
Well, it's almost like Jordan knows it's a failure of an operation, and to distance himself from that failure, he just doesn't stay that involved with it. It's like,
hard to
I'm not
distance.
going to put my fingerprints all over what's going on here.
It's
Even
hard
though
to
it's
distance
my
yourself.
team.
Yeah, when you own it, it's a weird.
Isn't that
stance.
odd, though?
Yeah, especially if you're him. Like,
But it's like if we're not doing well, I can always fall back on, well, I didn't really care about that.
yeah, it's
side
not
it.
your average owner. It's the greatest player with a chance to hire a coach, and they end up with Steve Clifford. OutKick 360 rolls on. Paul, the one aspect, one of the things that helped Texas with land Arch Manning, you say is not that big of a deal?
Well, the Athletic did a story, where they tried to detail how Texas built relationships with Arch to get this thing off the ground that ultimately helped them land him. But, you're going to lead with a good detail in this story that makes you think, oh, well, here it goes. Well, they lead with the fact that quarterback coach, 36-year-old A.J. Milway, had a workaround, during the 6-week spring evaluation period where coaches could be around. He showed up really early at Isidore Newman School in New Orleans. He would arrive at the weight room before anybody else. He'd even beat Manning's coach, Nelson Stewart, there. Nelson Stewart said when A.J. came down this spring 2 times, he turned the lights on in the weight room. That's how early he got there. This is a big, that's the key to getting Arch Manning is showing up at Isidore Newman before anybody else shows up there. I can't believe, A, that there aren't 10 coaches there at 4 o'clock in the morning waiting for he and his coach. But B, that's a workaround?
Yeah,
I'm thoroughly unimpressed by that being
getting there
some
early
kind of,
is kind of expected. That's your average recruiting story, honestly. But there's no doubt that the relationship with the quarterback coach and Manning.
Yeah.
Well, see,
is
I
a
hear
factor.
that. I hear that, though, and I think that's just someone who's trying to articulate how hard someone worked in the recruiting process and the relationship they built without a great anecdote to share.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So fall back on, he was
But
there really early
that's
to turn the
nothing.
lights on. It's not a big deal.
Plenty of coaches are doing that to chase plenty of recruits all the time who are not Arch Manning.
It is interesting to see how Sarkisian is starting to build his roster there like you would go in and completely start to rebuild an NFL franchise.
A lot of linemen.
He has started up front in the trenches in last year's recruiting class. And this year has been about wide receivers and quarterback, both in the transfer portal and by landing Manning for next year's crop. It's an and he had the 5th rated recruiting class last year, and he just focused on linemen.
I get the people that they're talking about he's worked with quarterback-wise, Leinart. He's with Matt Ryan for a little bit. Who am I forgetting? But
Carson Palmer was his first one.
yeah, but he's also not been the guy in charge of those
Tua,
quarterbacks.
he's
right.
He called play. He was the offensive
Well,
coordinator.
it's selective in that he was quarterback coach starting out for Carson Palmer and Matt Leinart, and then became offensive coordinator for other guys, like Mark Sanchez was one that went to the NFL.
He also played the position.
But then for Tua, he was his offensive coordinator, right? So, he was around those guys and coached them.
And then
Which
it
is
just
a
hits
good
me
thing,
as we
but
as
it's
we
not
wrap up.
been the guy.
It hits me. They focused on linemen last year, and didn't Texas hand out $50,000 to every lineman through a nonprofit?
Every offensive lineman.
Yes. That really helps your quarterback as well.
I believe it's the Cattlemen
They're
Society.
paid. They're paid well. Back at it on Monday. Enjoy the weekend. OutKick 360 across the OutKick network.
Don't block the box. Do lock your locks. Don't forget about Brittany Griner.